Hello, dear viewers. Support me by subscribing to my channel and share my video if you like it. And also, make sure you comment your thoughts. Now let's start the video. The sky was a canvas of horror, bloody red, streaked with black clouds that churned like boiling ink. Bolts of golden thunder cracked through the heavens with deafening roars, tearing the silence into splinters. The land beneath that apocalyptic sky was broken, charred, and soaked in blood. The corpses of millions blanketed the ground in every direction, a grotesque sea of lifeless flesh and shattered armor that stretched beyond the horizon. In the middle of this vast field of death stood a single figure. He was clad in black armor, twisted and jagged like the shadows of a nightmare. Dents and cracks marred the once impenetrable plates, and blood, some his, most not, streaked across his body like war paint. His face was hidden behind a helmet of darkness. But from within, two glowing purple eyes burned with a cold, merciless light. His hair, long and wild, flared behind him like a crown of violet fire, untamed and furious even in the stillness. He stood tall despite the ruin, shoulders squared, chest heaving with the weight of his breath. Around him was devastation, unlike anything the world had ever known, and he was its sole architect. A chime echoed through his mind, clean and mechanical. The cold voice of the system followed it. Congratulations, mission complete. The last of the Eterim is defeated. You have obtained the title, the Supreme Shadow Monarch. The man did not flinch. He stared blankly across the sea of the dead, voice gravelly with exhaustion and hate. What's the point, you stupid system? I'm the only thing living in this world now. After all this, there's nothing left. Silence, then another ping. As a reward for achieving the title of True Shadow Monarch, you will be transported to a random world with all of your powers intact. No system interference, no missions, a chance to start over, or, if you choose, you may repeat your missions in pursuit of a better outcome. The man blinked. For a moment, he didn't speak. That's new, he muttered dryly. You don't give me options, just orders. Are you finally freeing me? He stood there for several long seconds, the golden thunder illuminating the destruction around him with each flash. He took it all in, what little remained of the world, the silence of the dead, the end of everything he had known. I'll go to a new world, he said at last. There's no way I'm repeating this hell again, and it's not like I have anything I care about here. Good riddance. The system gave its final chime. Choice confirmed. New world. Thank you for your long service, host. We wish you the best of luck. The red sky faded into darkness. The thunder stopped. The world grew still. And as the man felt his mind slip into the abyss, as if falling into a deep sleep, his last thought was not of victory, but of what it meant to escape the endless hell. A low breath escaped the young boy's lips as his eyes fluttered open. The ceiling above him was unfamiliar, yet not, his surroundings whispered of both comfort and confusion. He blinked once slowly, then sat up in bed. For a fleeting second, his black eyes shimmered with an eerie purple glow like embers flaring in the dark before fading back to black. The boy looked around the room. A luxurious suite, well kept, filled with expensive furniture and elegance meant for someone of great status. It felt familiar. A strange echo rippled in his mind, and then the flood came, his entire 13 years of life, his name, his family, his memories, laughter and sorrow, struggles and silence. Then, a sharp end. He hadn't gone to sleep. He had died. The boy rose to his feet, rubbing his temple as fragments settled into place. The system gave me the body of a boy who died, he murmured, his voice quiet, bemused. How nice of it. His gaze fell to the floor, specifically to the shadow cast by his own frame in the soft light of the room. Dozens, no, hundreds of eyes stared back at him from the inky darkness of his shadow, blinking in unison, watching him, recognizing him. A slow smile crept across the boy's lips. I can see you. All of you are here. He walked toward the tall mirror, propped elegantly in the corner. The reflection staring back at him was youthful, fair-skinned, with messy black hair and dark eyes full of thought. A beautiful child, born into wealth and privilege. I'll enjoy this life, he whispered to his reflection. His voice was soft, but his eyes glowed once more, the same burning violet that had once terrified rules and monarchs. And don't worry, boy. For the body and name you left me, I'll avenge your death and your parents too. Ashbourne Black. A fitting name, he thought. He had inherited the body of Ashbourne Black, heir to the prestigious Black family, once one of the richest families in Metropolis City. From the memories he'd absorbed, he knew the truth behind the tragic tale. His two uncles, driven by greed and envy, had conspired against Ashbourne's parents. They poisoned them slowly and efficiently, removing the family one by one. The boy himself, barely tolerated by either uncle, and had been fed the same fate. His death planned to be brushed off as a fragile constitution and a broken heart. Ashbourne, he now, wasn't fragile, and he was far from broken. With deliberate steps, he walked through the grand villa halls, the polished floors echoing beneath his bare feet. His destination was the grand dining room. From the laughter echoing within, he could tell the parasites were enjoying their feast. He pushed open the double doors without knocking. The opulent dining room was filled with the sound of forks, glass clinks, and idle chatter until silence swept the room like a winter storm. Every head turned, scowls, sneers, and disdain met his presence. The first uncle, the elder of the two, lowered his wine glass. "What are you doing here?" Ashbourne smiled, but it was a cold, dead thing that didn't reach his eyes. "Congratulations," he said, tone almost cheerful. "You killed your brother, his wife, even his only son, your own nephew. Now I take his place. So I owe him to avenge him." The lights flickered. His shadow moved. No, grew. Darkness poured out from his feet like a tidal wave, flooding the room, swallowing the table and walls in seconds. Shadows wrapped around chairs, glasses shattered midair, and all color drained from the room. The two families froze in terror. None of them could move, not even to scream. "Any last words?" Ashbourne asked. The first uncle fell to his knees, weeping. "Please, we're your family." "My family?" Ashbourne chuckled. His voice rang deep like a blade sliding from a sheath. "I told you, your nephew is dead. His soul isn't here anymore." He tilted his head. "I took over. I have no relatives. One of a kind, you could say." And with that, the darkness surged forward. The screams of the first uncle and his wife and sons were muffled by the abyss as the shadows devoured them whole. Ashbourne turned his head slowly toward the second uncle. The man trembled, trying to speak. "My daughters, they have nothing to do with this. Please, at least spare them." Ashbourne looked at the two girls, one perhaps 15, the other barely 9. His smile returned, cruel and sharp. "The older one's pretty enough to be my slave," he said with mock thoughtfulness. "And the young one, probably going to grow into her sister's beauty." He paused, his smile faded. "Unfortunately for you," his voice turned low, venomous, "I don't care for that, nor do I care for their age. A family for a family, revenge of equal proportions. Nothing more, nothing less." The second uncle screamed as the darkness devoured his daughters, then the shaking wife, and lastly, he was devoured. One by one, all of them vanished into the abyss. That night, Ashbourne purged the villa of its rot. Every servant, every smiling traitor who had bowed to the murderers fell beneath the shadow. No plea was heard, no mercy was given, and once it was over, silence reigned. Ashbourne sat alone in the grand dining room, shadows flickering around him like loyal beasts. He rested his chin on his hand, gazing into the candlelight as memories stirred once more. The original Ashbourne's mind had offered much, but one memory held his attention above the rest. A memory of a man flying through the sky. A red cape, a red sais on his chest. Ashbourne's glowing eyes narrowed. "So this world has Superman," he murmured. A slow grin curved across his lips. "I know this world." The name Black Corp had once echoed through the heart of Metropolis as a symbol of ambition and industry. Second only to LexCorp, it had stood tall for decades. Its wealth built on the backs of construction empires and cutting-edge automobile manufacturing. From the soaring skyline to the thunderous engines on the streets, Black Corp had left its mark. But behind the shining glass towers and polished boardrooms, vultures circled. Since the tragic death of Elijah and Seraphina Black, the parents of Ashbourne Black, the company had been steered not by blood, but by the will of the board. Until Ashbourne came of age, or until he too died, the decision-making remained suspended, awaiting the legal shift of power to the two uncles. But the uncles were dead now, both of them, and with their sudden demise, so too vanished the planned transfer of power. A new guardian was required, But Ashbourne had no intention of being shackled by bureaucracy or drawing attention to himself. He had other plans rooted in shadows. 2 days after the purge, the nation woke to tragedy. News outlets blared across every screen. The entire black family found dead in Gotham. Murder or message? Black family massacre rocks metropolis elite. Ashbourne Black and Uncle Arthur, only survivors of the Gotham slaughter. Their bodies unrecognizable, mutilated, burned nearly beyond identification, were found dumped in the outskirts of Gotham. The scene was horrific. Bones shattered, skin torn, blood soaked into the dark earth. The kind of brutality that spoke of a message, not a mere crime. According to the police report, only Ashbourne and Arthur Black had been spared. Arthur, having stayed behind to care for the sickly Ashbourne, was now the grieving patriarch of a family wiped from existence. And Arthur wept well, because Arthur was Ashbourne. The Shadow Monarch had simply taken the man's form through his shape-shifting ability. Every wrinkle, every mannerism, every trembling sob in front of the cameras. He played the devastated uncle with haunting precision, a man who had lost his brother, his wife, and both daughters in one vile stroke of violence. The investigation dragged on with no real answers. No fingerprints, no digital traces, no signs of motive except a vague connection to organized crime. Some speculated that a Gotham-based crime syndicate had struck, enraged by Black Corp's plans to construct several high-end buildings in their turf. With the family dead and the Gotham project scrapped, the theory made sense. But truth, as always, remained buried in the dark. With the guardianship rendered irrelevant and no surviving claimants to challenge him, Arthur Black, Ashbourne in disguise, was granted control of Black Corp. Legal, clean, unquestioned. And his first act as the new head, he buried the name Black Corp. From its ashes, a new monolith rose. Shadow Corp. The change made waves across every major financial outlet. Analysts debated the implications. Reporters asked why such a drastic rebranding had occurred so suddenly. A week later, Arthur Black finally answered during a quiet press interview, voice low and eyes dimmed by fabricated grief. Ashbourne wanted this. After losing his parents, the two that built this legacy, he said, Black Corp is hollow, a shadow of what it once was. He asked if we could rename it to honor what's left. Just a broken-hearted child's wish, I suppose. And how could I say no? The image was perfect. A boy lost in sorrow. An uncle honoring his orphaned nephew's wishes. The narrative spread like wildfire, painted in mourning and sentimentality. Investors stayed. Sympathy flowed. Public trust remained. Behind it all, Ashbourne smiled. The shadow now wore a mask, and the world believed it. Ashbourne had seen too much in his former life. Too much death. Too much power. Too much emptiness. The system had carved into him a legacy drenched in blood, commanding him to conquer, to destroy, to become a monarch of shadows in a broken, lifeless world. And he had done it. He had stood atop a mountain of corpses, crowned by lightning and silence. Billions dead. Centuries of endless war. He was tired of that. In this new world, he had no desire to wage wars or be conqueror. No hunger for domination. He craved something far more simple. Enjoyment. So Ashbourne designed a life for himself with a singular vision. He would live like a human. He would work, enjoy, and indulge in the mortal pleasures this world offered. No missions, no systems, no endless war, but that didn't mean stagnation. To ensure Shadow Corp remained dominant and untouchable, Ashbourne began collecting shadows, not of soldiers or assassins, but of the greatest minds in this era. Scientists, engineers, economists, doctors. He extracted them from the forgotten dead, snatching up every intellect the world buried in obscurity. Biologists who once played with the edges of life, chemists whose formulas held many revelations, tech pioneers and financial geniuses, each one reduced to pure skill and intelligence, their personalities erased. Perfect tools, silent, tireless, and bound to his will. Under fake identities and fabricated backstories, their groundbreaking work was quietly filtered into Shadow Corp's pipeline. Products, patents, and advancements flowed like water, and no one outside of him had a clue. And it worked. In just 5 years, Shadow Corp exploded into new industries, medicine, energy, and software development. Medical breakthroughs pushed the company to the forefront of biotech. Revolutionary battery designs and sustainable energy tech drew global attention. Their software branch released tools years ahead of competitors. News outlets sang praises of Arthur Black, the man who endured the loss of his entire family and still carried forward the legacy. A resilient soul, they called him. A genius guardian to his young nephew. And then the second tragedy struck. On the eve of Ashbourne's 18th birthday, Arthur Black, his own disguised persona, was reported dead in a catastrophic accident inside Shadow Corp's energy laboratory. The company had been working on a new high-capacity battery system when something went catastrophically wrong. The entire lab was incinerated in an instant. No bodies were recovered, only ash remained. Among the dead, Arthur Black, beloved head of Shadow Corp, the public mourned. News anchors called it a cursed family legacy. And Ashbourne? He buried Arthur's mask for good. The next morning, Ashbourne Black walked into the towering Shadow Corp building not as a boy, but as its new master. The board had seen opportunity in the loss. A young heir, no degree, no experience, no Arthur to shield him. It was time to wrest back control. One board member stepped forward, speaking in syrupy words about his deep friendship with Arthur, about how the board stood ready to help Ashbourne during this difficult transition. Ashbourne listened with a calm expression. Then he laughed. "Friendship?" he echoed coldly. "Jack Everstone, you lobbied to cut R&D funding last quarter. Arthur had to personally override your vote." The man's face drained of color. Ashbourne's smile never reached his eyes. "Don't lie to me. I've known everything this company does, every project, every budget, every backdoor deal. I let Arthur play his part. But don't confuse the mask for the mind beneath." A heavy silence fell over the boardroom. Then Ashbourne turned to the rest of them. "Shadow Corp continues. As it is. No changes." They didn't argue. Not after that. They had watched Arthur carry the company through its golden age. But now, in the presence of this young man, this 18-year-old who radiated calm power and unflinching control, they began to see the truth. Ashbourne wasn't Arthur's successor. He was the one behind Arthur's success. Efficient. Ruthless. Brilliant. Whispers began to circulate. Ashbourne proved himself to everyone quickly. Everyone viewed him as a prodigy with a boundless future. Under Ashbourne's control, the Shadow Corp grew much faster than before and began to catch up with LexCorp. 1 year had passed since Ashbourne Black stood as the face and force behind Shadow Corp. A year of seamless expansion, strategic acquisitions, and subtle dominion over industries that most corporations only dreamed of touching. Ashbourne sat in his penthouse office, the skyline of Metropolis stretching beyond the glass wall behind him. The morning light filtered through as he casually flipped through the day's news. The front page, as expected, was awash in headlines glorifying the Justice League. Wonder Woman stops global terror threat. Flash breaks records with global evacuation in seconds. Superman thwarts alien invasion. He didn't even blink as he turned the page without a second look. Heroes and villains, gods and monsters. The never-ending soap opera of costume drama held little interest for him now. He had seen wars between dimensions, led them, won them. The concept of superpowered egos clashing over ideals or anything that they can come up with has long lost its charm. A knock on the door broke his thoughts. His assistant entered promptly, a slim tablet in hand. He was a middle-aged man that had been the assistant of Ashbourne's father since the early days of Black Corp. He remained next to Arthur as it changed to Shadow Corp, and now he is standing by Ashbourne's side. The assistant said, "Sir, we received a call from LexCorp. Mr. Luthor has requested a business meeting with you to discuss a potential partnership." Ashbourne's black eyes sparkled faintly with intrigue. "Lex Luthor." The assistant added, "Sir, if I may, please be careful when dealing with Lex Luthor. He is a cunning snake and can't be trusted." Ashbourne set the newspaper down and looked at the man. Even in the early memories of the original Ashbourne, the man was present, and Ashbourne, since the moment he laid his eyes on him, felt a slight trust and kinship. Ashbourne believed it was because of the lingering feelings the original Ashbourne had to the man. Leaning back in his chair, Ashbourne answered, "I know, Uncle Rex. Please, accept it and schedule it for tomorrow." The assistant nodded with a smile. "As long as you know," then exited. Ashbourne closed his eyes. At once his shadow stretched unnaturally, oozing across the polished floor like ink in water. A sliver detached from the main body and slithered under the door without a sound. Moments later, Ashbourne's consciousness shifted. He stood, not physically, but as a presence within the sleek, sterile office of Lex Luthor himself. The man was speaking with his stoic assistant, Mercy, discussing the final touches of their pitch and plan. Ashbourne smirked. The next day, Lex Luthor arrived at Shadow Corp's headquarters, a smile carved perfectly onto his face as he entered the executive floor. He moved with the charisma of a man who believed the world belonged to him, and perhaps, to some extent, it did. In Ashbourne's office, they exchanged the usual pleasantries. "You know," Lex said with a smooth tone, "watching what you've done with Shadow Corp this past year, it's like looking into a mirror of my younger self." Ashbourne returned the compliment with a respectful nod and a polite smile. "You're giving me too much credit, Mr. Luthor. You've had it harder, and truthfully, I believe you're far more brilliant than I am. I even dare to say you are a contender for the smartest man on Earth." Lex's smile deepened. Few things pleased him more than recognition, especially from someone competent. It stroked the part of his ego that believed he was not just smart, but the smartest man alive. Hearing those words from Ashbourne, with a touch of sincerity, only confirmed Lex's own thoughts. "You're underestimating yourself," Lex said. "What you've accomplished in a year is no small feat." He paused, then leaned forward. "But let's get to business." Lex pulled a set of documents from his briefcase and slid them across the desk. Ashbourne flipped through them, scanning with supernatural speed and clarity. His eyes lingered on diagrams, proposed blueprints, and projected timelines. "A maglev transport system," Ashbourne murmured. "State to state, high speed. It has potential." Lex's grin widened. "I knew you'd see the value. Faster logistics, efficient travel, a true revolution in infrastructure." Ashbourne closed the file, lacing his fingers under his chin. "It's a good idea, but I don't approve of the 50-50 profit split." Lex raised an eyebrow. "And what would you suggest instead?" 2080, Ashbourne said coolly. "In my favor." There was a pause. "That's unusually greedy," Lex remarked, leaning back. 50-50 is a fair share by any business standard." Ashbourne's smile remained fixed, but his tone dipped with amused certainty. "LexCorp could build this on its own. It doesn't need us. But you came here anyway. Let me guess, you plan to use the infrastructure to move certain unregistered items. Weapons, tech, maybe other assets. And with Shadow Corp involved, if something goes wrong, blame and damage are shared. That makes it legally complicated to touch you." Lex's face froze momentarily, the flicker of surprise betraying his otherwise composed expression. Ashbourne's smile turned razor sharp. "Mr. Luthor, my opinion of you isn't low, it's high. So high I expect this level of cunning, and I respect it." He leaned forward slightly. "My motto has always been, make friends when you can. Preferably friends with benefits. I get a nice cut while you get your shipment safely transported with legal insulation. Everyone wins." Lex was silent. Then, slowly, he smiled, extending his hand. "I think we're more alike than I initially thought." Ashbourne shook it, his hand firm, shadow ever present behind his polite facade. When Lex left the office, his smile faded as the elevator doors closed. He had achieved what he came for, mostly. But Ashbourne, that young man, had seen through him with frightening ease. Lex didn't like being read like a book. For a moment, he had considered denying it all, spinning some charm and clever phrasing, but the look in Ashbourne's eyes, cold, amused, certain, nothing he could have said would have made a difference. In the end, Lex Luthor decided it was still a gain, one more ally with shared interest and mutual cover. A friend with benefits, as Ashbourne had put it. But Lex also knew, beneath that polite young face was something darker. Something even he couldn't quite see through yet. A week had passed since Shadow Corp and LexCorp signed their historic joint venture. The announcement of a massive new infrastructure project, a nationwide maglev transportation network, swept across the media like wildfire. 3 years of work, billions in projected revenue, and the promise of faster, cleaner transportation had the public in an uproar of support. News anchors praised the forward-thinking partnership. Economists speculated how this would reshape interstate commerce. Public approval surged for both corporations. And yet, amid the celebration, Ashbourne received a visitor no media channel could have predicted. It happened late in the day. The sky was beginning to blush with the orange hues of sunset, as Ashbourne sat behind his desk, buried in quarterly reports and cost assessments. His office was quiet, save the occasional tap of his pen. Then a knock, not at the door, at the window. Ashbourne's eyes shifted, puzzled. Slowly, he turned around. Floating just beyond the glass, high above Metropolis, was Superman. The Man of Steel hovered, his red cape swaying gently in the wind. His expression was calm. Ashbourne arched an eyebrow, but betrayed no surprise. He stood, adjusting his suit jacket before striding over to the window. With a slow, relaxed motion, he unlocked it and pulled it open. A cool breeze swept into the office. "Come in," Ashbourne said with a casual wave, his voice unhurried. "I'd offer you a seat, but I doubt you're here for tea." Superman stepped inside with the gentleness of a man who knew his strength. "I don't want to sound like a bad host," Ashbourne said as he gestured for his unexpected guest to speak. "But I am curious. What brings you here?" Superman gave a small smile. "I saw the announcement today, your partnership with Lex Luthor." Ashbourne nodded, keeping his expression neutral. "I came," Superman continued, "to offer a word of caution." Ashbourne listened silently. "Lex Luthor is dangerous, like a snake. He might smile today and strike tomorrow. I've dealt with him enough to know that trusting him comes at a cost." There was no malice in Superman's tone, just concern. "I've also heard of you, Mr. Black. You've gained a solid reputation. Your employees speak highly of you. That's rare in your position. So consider this a friendly warning." A long pause followed. Ashbourne's gaze sharpened subtly as he walked back to his desk, thoughtful. "I appreciate the concern," he said after a moment, "and I won't pretend I'm unaware of Luthor's extracurricular activities. They're hardly a secret in the business world." He leaned back in his chair. "But a snake is still useful, when you know where its fangs are. I've taken precautions. If he bites, well, let's just say I don't plan to bleed easily." Superman studied him for a beat longer, then gave a small nod. "Just be careful," he said again, stepping back toward the open window. "Some deals cost more than money." Ashbourne stood again and walked over as Superman floated out into the open sky. Without a word, Ashbourne pulled the window closed. He stood there for a few seconds staring at the shrinking figure of the hero as he vanished into the clouds. Amusement flickered in his eyes. Since when does Superman involve himself in business deals? Ashbourne thought to himself. The Man of Steel had come to deliver a warning, but it only made the shadows grow more curious. Ashbourne had always been a man of peculiar habits. Despite commanding one of the most powerful corporations in the world, his whims often led him to unexpected places. Today it was Jump City. Officially, Shadow Corp had a chemical laboratory here, primarily researching treatments for issues like hair loss, but Ashbourne's visit had nothing to do with business. He came for pizza. When his assistant, visibly baffled, asked why he was traveling so far just for a slice, Ashbourne simply replied, "I told you before, Uncle Rex, I enjoy the process of things." The answer, vague and philosophical, left the old assistant more confused than ever. But it wasn't the first time. Just last month, Ashbourne had flown across states to Central City, all for a cup of coffee from a shop he'd read about in an obscure blog post. No meetings, no deals, just coffee. Today was no different. Dressed in gray slacks, a black button-up shirt, and dark sunglasses, Ashbourne walked through the streets of Jump City, admiring its simplicity. The skyline wasn't as tall or glittering as Metropolis, but there was a casual warmth to it. Eventually, he arrived at the famous pizza shop. It was a small place with barely enough room for more than a dozen people, but its reputation was legendary. Ashbourne took a seat by the window, ordered a classic combination, and took a slow, appreciative bite. Delicious, he thought. I might return someday. That piece didn't last. 5 figures approached his table. The one in front was a pale girl with pink hair, her confident stride marking her the leader. Behind her came a hulking giant, a boy in a black cape, a short green-suited teen, and a man in red spandex with a division symbol across his chest. Ashbourne recognized them immediately. "High five." The girl stopped by his table and asked, "Are you Ashbourne Black?" Ashbourne didn't even pause between bites. "I am." "Told you it's him," the green-suited boy said excitedly. "That's the Shadow Corp guy." The girl's smile widened. The rest grinned. Ashbourne met their expressions with a pleasant one of his own. "And you 5 must be the Hive 5. They blinked, slightly surprised, then smirked. Recognition always stroked their egos. You've heard of our deeds? The girl asked, clearly glowing with pride. That makes things easier. We're kidnapping you for ransom? Ashbourne chewed slowly, then said, A ransom from whom? The smile never left his lips. I don't have any family. I own Shadow Corp, so no money moves without my approval. Asking the authorities would just make both heroes and villains target you. Heroes want to save me, and villains want to carry favor with me. Not exactly profitable for you. The girl's expression faltered. She opened her mouth, but couldn't seem to find the words. After a few seconds, she awkwardly said, We'll figure the details out later. Ashbourne nodded, sipping his drink. I don't see that working well for you, but that's your decision. For now, why not join me for lunch? I'd be a terrible host if I let my kidnappers work on empty stomachs. High Five blinked again. The boy behind the leader stepped forward, confused and annoyed. Do you even understand your situation? He snapped. We could kill you. Ashbourne looked up at him, still smiling. I'm a high-profile hostage. Killing me would defeat your purpose, wouldn't it? It's in your best interest to keep me safe. So no, I'm not in danger. Silence fell over the group again. I'm hungry, the giant finally muttered. We can eat first. The pink-haired girl and the short green-suited boy turned to him with an exasperated, shut up. Then they turned back to Ashbourne with a firmer tone. You're coming with us. Now. Before Ashbourne could respond, a sudden dome of black energy burst open nearby, warping the air as 5 new figures stepped out, each clad in vibrant colors and distinct uniforms. Their leader, Robin, pointed directly at High Five. This is your only warning, he said sharply. Surrender, and maybe avoid the beating. Jinx, the pink-haired leader of High Five, spun around and glared at Ashbourne. You were buying time. Ashbourne kept his smile. No, I wasn't. I sincerely invited you to eat. Jinx didn't answer. Her eyes began to glow. Get them, she barked. Chaos erupted as High Five launched toward the Teen Titans. Beast Boy morphed mid-air. Cyborg fired a plasma cannon. Raven summoned dark tendrils. Starfire let loose bursts of green energy. And Robin charged headfirst into battle. Ashbourne remained seated at his table. He calmly lifted another slice of pizza, took a bite, and leaned back in his chair. The battle of heroes and villains played out just beyond his table. Ashbourne. He is simply going to enjoy the show. Ashbourne watched as smoke curled up from fractured pavement and shattered glass sparkled across the street, unaffected. The chaos around him barely earned a second glance as he calmly raised his hand and called the waiter. Could you prepare a few more pizzas? He asked politely, watching the battle unfold outside like a theater performance. The waiter, trembling from the sight of Teen Titans and High Five turning the block into a war zone, nodded hesitantly and ran back inside. Outside, the confrontation ended as expected, with High Five lying defeated and tied up with mechanical locks, bruised and groaning amid the debris. Teen Titans stood tall, their chest rising with adrenaline and exertion. Ashbourne took that as his cue. With his hands in his pockets and the same ever-calm smile on his face, he walked toward the downed villains. Dude, this is dangerous. Stay back, Beast Boy called out when he noticed the stranger approaching. Ashbourne barely slowed his pace. It's fine, he said softly, still smiling. I just want to talk to them. The Titans exchanged uneasy glances, all except Raven, who furrowed her brow. There was something strange about this man. She couldn't quite place it. His aura was quiet, almost dull. But beneath it, something stirred. A sliver of something dark and familiar. She frowned. The idea forming in her mind. Was he like her? Did he have demon blood too? Her expression shifted. Eyes narrowing in suspicion, and a strange, involuntary interest. Ashbourne stopped in front of the restrained High Five. He looked at them without condescension. Just quiet contemplation. You're not suited for crime and villainy, he said bluntly. The 5 glared at him. Jinx managed to growl. Wait till we're free, then you'll see how unsuited we are. Ashbourne raised a brow, still smiling. No need to be angry. I'm just commenting on the facts. Kidnapping for ransom. That's weak. The proper approach would have been kidnap me, torture me, for money, then execute. You didn't think that far, did you? Jinx blinked. The sheer absurdity of what he said froze her mind. Her team wasn't doing much better. Even the Teen Titans looked stunned. Ashbourne chuckled lightly. As I said, you're not suitable for villainy, but, his eyes softened. I see potential in you elsewhere. A bright future. Confusion spread like wildfire among the listeners. Then Ashbourne's gaze zeroed in on Gizmo. "Gizmo," he said, "I offer you a job. Work for me. I'll give you all the funding and resources you need. No amount of crime can offer you what I can." Gizmo's eyes widened. "Wait, are you serious?" Ashbourne nodded. "You're smart. It's a shame to see that intelligence wasted on petty crime." He turned his eyes to the others. "Billy, Mammoth, Keed, Wekied. I have similar offers for you three. I can use your talents in different areas. I'll give you a home, good food, money, and respect. The pay will be better than anything crime offers, and the work might even be fun." The three stared at him, stunned. No one ever had offered them something like this, especially not someone they had just tried to kidnap. "What do you think you're doing?" a sharp voice cut through. Ashbourne turned to see Robin, arms crossed, frustration bubbling beneath his usually composed exterior. Ashbourne tilted his head. "Apologies. I thought I was being clear. I'm offering them jobs." Robin's eye twitched. "They're criminals. They're going to prison." Ashbourne kept smiling. "And what is their crime?" Robin frowned deeply. "They tried to kidnap you." "I forgive them," Ashbourne said with a shrug. "That's allowed, right?" Robin waved a hand at the rubble. "They destroyed property. They endangered civilians." Ashbourne looked around. "And you participated in the destruction. You fired the first shot, didn't you? You carry half the blame. But that's fine. I'll pay for all the damages, plus extra, as a formal apology." Robin looked like he just swallowed a mouthful of lemon juice. "They're dangerous," he insisted. Ashbourne nodded thoughtfully. "I agree. I was nearly kidnapped." The words were calm, factual, yet carried a quiet, unnerving logic that made Robin clench his fists. Then Ashbourne turned to Cyborg. "Would you mind releasing them? I'll have my assistant pay for everything before the day ends. If not, you're welcome to take them to the station. I'll just post their bail." Cyborg glanced at Robin, unsure. Ashbourne added gently, "I'll cover everything. No tricks." The Titans looked among each other. All five of them were thoroughly annoyed, Raven still suspicious, Beast Boy confused, Starfire outright frowning, Cyborg hesitant, and Robin glaring daggers. At last, Robin spoke. "Let them go," he said tightly. A part of him hoped Ashbourne would regret this decision down the line. Ashbourne bowed his head slightly. "Thank you." As the restraints were removed, he turned back to the bewildered villains. "My offer still stands. If you refuse, I'll walk away. Pay the damages. And forget today ever happened. If you accept, we'll head back to sign contracts." He grinned and gestured toward the nearby restaurant. After lunch, of course. The Hive Five exchanged uncertain glances, the world around them slowly beginning to shift in a way none of them could have predicted. The silence that followed Ashbourne's offer was heavy, almost hesitant, until Gizmo looked at the others, then back at Ashbourne, and gave a small nod. The others followed one by one. And finally, they all nodded in agreement. "We'll give it a shot," Gizmo said. Ashbourne's calm smile widened ever so slightly. "Excellent choice," he said. "I already asked the waiter for a few extra pizzas for the four of you. Please, come with me." As he turned toward the pizza shop, the group began to follow, until a soft cough halted them. Jinx stood still, arms crossed, lips tight. "Are you not forgetting someone?" Ashbourne stopped, glanced at her, and with the same unchanging, cordial smile, replied, "No, I haven't forgotten. The offers are for these four, because I value their abilities to work for me. In your case, I have no suitable job for your talent, and I have no intention of hiring a cute and pretty face for no purpose." Jinx's eyes widened. You think I'm cute and pretty?" Ashbourne tilted his head slightly. "Yes, I do." She blinked, quickly shaking her head as if to snap out of it. "That's not the point. My powers are amazing. I agree," Ashbourne cut in gently. "Your powers are good, but I simply don't have a job where I could utilize them properly. That's all." The other four looked at their stunned teammate. Gizmo narrowed his eyes, then turned toward Ashbourne. "We're a bundle deal," he said. "Either all five of us come, or none of us do." Billy, Mammoth, and Kydwaikid nodded in agreement. No hesitation. Ashbourne observed them silently for a few seconds, his gaze unreadable. Then he exhaled softly and nodded. "Fine. She'll come too. I'll do my best to find something that suits her." Jinx blinked again, clearly trying to process the emotional roller coaster she was being dragged through. With the matter settled, Ashbourne turned and continued walking toward the pizza shop. hands in his pockets. The 5 young villains, no, former villains, followed behind him, wearing small but genuine smiles. Behind them, the Teen Titans stood silently, watching the surreal scene unfold. It was like they'd been entirely forgotten, mere background players in a bizarre play. If he gets kidnapped again, Robin muttered, rubbing his temples. I'm not saving him. He turned and walked off. The rest followed. Cyborg shook his head. Starfire looked confused and mildly insulted. Beast Boy whispered, Is this how villains get hired now? Raven lingered behind for a moment longer. Her violet eyes flicked toward the pizza shop, where the 6 had already stepped inside. What was that feeling? There was something off about that man, she thought. Something buried beneath that gentle smile. Not malevolent, but not normal either. Something like her. With a quiet sigh, she turned and followed her team. But her mind was far from finished with the strange man who'd turned a kidnapping into a recruiting session. Lunch had gone surprisingly well. Amid laughter, curious glances, and boxes of half-eaten pizza, the atmosphere around the table felt less like a group of former villains and more like new recruits on their first day. When the final slice was eaten and the drinks were emptied, Ashbourne stood and turned to Kaidwakid. Teleport us back to Shadow Corp, please, he said, his tone as casual as ever. Keed nodded, and with a flicker of darkness, the group vanished from Jump City and reappeared in the heart of Metropolis, right inside the towering, glass-clad headquarters of Shadow Corp. As Ashbourne stepped inside with the 5 former Hive members trailing behind him, heads turned. Employees paused mid-conversation, mid-typing, mid-walk, but none dared speak. The presence of Ashbourne was enough to keep them silent, and his unexpected entourage was just another mystery they knew better than to question. At the reception desk, Ashbourne's assistant spotted him, froze, and dropped his tablet in shock. Ashbourne walked up to him, placed a hand on his shoulder gently, and said, Later, send someone to check on Jump City. There was a fight near the pizza shop I visited. I want all the damages to be paid. The man nodded weakly, unsure what was more surprising, the fight or the 5 villains now casually standing behind his boss. Come, Ashbourne said, still smiling, and walked deeper into the building. The assistant followed, as did the 5 former villains, who exchanged curious glances at the sleek, corporate hallways of Shadow Corp. They eventually entered Ashbourne's personal office, a large, modern space filled with dark wood, elegant furniture, and a panoramic view of Metropolis. Ashbourne sat behind his desk and leaned back in his chair, folding his hands as he looked at the 5 expectant faces before him. Let's begin. His gaze moved to Gizmo. Gizmo, I want you in the engineering department. They're working on mechanical systems and advanced tech, some of the brightest minds in the world. I'm sure you'll find their work interesting. If you have your own ideas or inventions, you're welcome to pursue them. The only condition, he lifted a finger, is you must check with the safety department before building anything. We had incidents before. Gizmo grinned and nodded quickly. Got it, boss. Ashbourne's gaze moved next to Billy, numerous. Billy, do you like video games? Billy blinked, caught off guard. Yeah? Ashbourne smiled. We recently started a division focused on creating video games. We need testers. With your ability, you could do the work of dozens by yourself. Billy's mouth dropped open. You serious? Just play games and get paid. With myself. Ashbourne nodded. Yes. Billy looked ready to cry with joy. Next, Ashbourne turned to Mammoth. Mammoth, I'd like you to work in construction. You'll follow architecture engineers and demolish areas scheduled for rebuild, controlled destruction. A legal outlet for your strength. Mammoth nodded enthusiastically. That's a job? Heck yeah. Ashbourne's eyes now met Kaidwakid's. You'll assist with transportation logistics. We'll figure out your range, stamina, frequency, and any limitations. You'll be fairly compensated, and whatever you save us in costs will reflect in your pay. Cutter gave a silent thumbs up. Then came the pause. The atmosphere shifted slightly as Ashbourne's gaze settled on Jinx. He studied her in silence, then asked, Do your powers do anything besides damage and bad luck? Jinx blinked, then shook her head. Do you have a degree in any field? Another shake of her head. Do you have any preferences or hobbies? Something you're good at? Jinx's lips trembled. Her third silent shake was slower than the rest. The room quieted. Her teammates fidgeted uncomfortably. Jinx stared at the floor, trying to will herself invisible. Ashbourne leaned forward, pinching the bridge of his nose. Do you know how to cook or clean? Jinx gave a weak laugh, barely more than a breath. Ashbourne sighed. Then you'll learn. You'll work at my manor. Daily chores, cleaning, cooking. You won't be around others, so no one will get hurt. You can learn at your own pace. If you ever want to try something new, let me know, and we'll figure it out. Jinx nodded slowly, her eyes cast downward. She knew what this was. A favor. A charity job. Not something earned. Her self-esteem sank like a stone. Ashbourne finally turned to his assistant. Make contracts for them later. For now, help them find a place to stay. Give them money to buy necessities. The old man nodded without hesitation and turned to lead the five out of the room. As they left, the four ex-villains kept casting worried glances at Jinx, who walked silently in the back. None said anything, but their loyalty was clear. They were here because of her, and she was here because of them. Ashbourne watched them go with his usual calm, thoughtful expression, and as the door closed behind them, he smiled. Partnering with a villain and hiring 5 more, this is entertaining. The afternoon sun filtered lazily through the tall windows of Ashbourne's office, casting golden rays over the sleek desk where he sat, a tablet in hand. Shadows flickered across his face as he read through performance reports. Gizmo's integration into engineering had gone smoother than expected. The kid was already improving one of their drone prototypes. Billy Numerous had broken a game build so efficiently the developers almost cried, then laughed. Mammoth had managed to bring down a condemned building in record time without damaging nearby infrastructure. KY Kid's teleportation range was still being tested, but so far logistics loved him. Jinx had no report. The villa had no staff to monitor and report her performance, and he himself didn't go there, as he was busy with other stuff. But his shadows did monitor the girl, and it seems she was trying to work with unexpected diligence, despite having no one beside her in the villa. She was going around cleaning and wiping dust. According to the shadows, she wasn't a problem, but she wasn't thriving yet either. Just as Ashbourne swiped to read the message from the head of the finance department, his monitor buzzed with an incoming video call. The name flashing on the screen brought an amused glint to his eyes. Lex Luthor. Ashbourne accepted the call with a casual flick of his finger. His expression didn't change. Still calm, still smiling. To what do I owe the pleasure? He greeted smoothly, folding his hands. Lex Luthor appeared on screen, his signature confidence smirk in place, seated in a tastefully minimalist office. I received a call this morning from Wayne Enterprises, he said with practiced ease. Bruce Wayne is coming to Metropolis to discuss joining the Maglev infrastructure project. Ashbourne's smile didn't falter. You don't have a problem with that, do you? The more the merrier, right? Lex leaned back, matching his tone. Your motto, isn't it? Make friends when you can. Ashbourne chuckled, nodding. True. Glad you understand me so well already. He let a pause hang just long enough before continuing. I'm fine with it, but a word of advice from a friend. Lex raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Ashbourne's smile dimmed just slightly, just enough to let the seriousness slip through. Be extra careful with Bruce Wayne. He can't be trusted. That got Lex's full attention. Oh? And what makes you say that? Ashbourne leaned back, his fingers tapping together, thoughtfully. Wayne Enterprises doesn't need to join a Maglev infrastructure project. Their tech division is self-sustaining, their urban investments are Gotham-centric, and historically, working for the benefit of the world outside Gotham has never been the Wayne's style. Lex narrowed his eyes as Ashbourne continued. He's not here for the project. He's here for something else. It might be related to us, or we might just be the distraction. Either way, I suggest keeping an eye on him. Lex went silent for a moment, the gears in his mind clearly turning. Then he gave a small nod. Thank you for the warning. The call ended moments later. Ashbourne leaned back in his chair again, this time with a thoughtful look that lingered in his eyes. He recalled Superman's warning, which had been vague but genuine. Luthor's planning something, and the Justice League is onto him. Or at least they are doubting him, Ashbourne thought to himself. And now Bruce Wayne, or perhaps more accurately, the big brooding bat was entering the equation. Ashbourne smiled, a slow, amused curve of the lips. Let's see how this plays out. The night was quiet around the Black family villa. Inside, Jinx collapsed onto the grand but lonely sofa in the sitting room. The polished floor gleamed. The shelves were dust-free, and every cushion on every couch was aligned with obsessive precision. She had cleaned the villa from top to bottom. And for what? She pulled her knees to her chest, resting her chin on them as she stared blankly across the room. The job felt like a punishment masked as charity. Being a villain had been wild, dangerous fun. Her powers were respected, even feared. Now she was scrubbing floors and organizing cutlery, not because she was the best suited for the job, but because she had nothing else to offer. The others, Gizmo, Billy, Mammoth, even Kide, were thriving, using their skills in places that made them smile. She wasn't stupid. She knew Ashbourne had only taken her in because the others refused to leave her behind. And as if to punctuate that lonely thought, her gaze drifted to the empty hall. Ashbourne hadn't been home since she started working here 3 days ago. No staff came or went. The food supplies were stocked when she arrived, and the villa had been spotless. If she hadn't seen it with her own eyes, she would have thought this place was long abandoned. So who was taking care of this mansion before she came? Her musing was cut off by the sudden chime of the front doorbell. It echoed through the marble halls like a whisper in a cathedral. Jinx blinked, confused. She hadn't been expecting anyone. She stood and made her way to the large, ornate door, half expecting to find a courier or maybe the old assistant. Instead, she found Gizmo, flanked by Billy, Mammoth, and Cade Waked, each one holding a box of pizza or a drink. Gizmo laughed the moment he saw her. "Didn't think I'd live to see the day you'd be in a maid outfit," he cackled. "We brought food. Thought we'd hang out a bit." A small, reluctant smile twitched at her lips before it faded again. "It's better if you don't stay," she said, voice low. "Ashbourne might not like it." Billy waved a hand, dismissively. "Nah, he's chill. Won't care if his good employees have a little fun." Jinx shook her head, concern creeping in. "He might not care about you guys, but this is his house. He probably doesn't want people lounging around it." Gizmo, as usual, didn't care for logic. "It's fine. We're not trashing the place." He stepped inside like he owned the villa, and the others followed without hesitation. Jinx stood frozen in the doorway for a moment, then sighed and followed them in. They gathered in the guest lounge, sprawled across couches, pizza boxes open, laughter bubbling as stories were shared. Gizmo was building something new with the engineers and loving the creative freedom. Billy had nearly broken the simulation program with his clones. Much to everyone's amusement, Mammoth had been nicknamed the Wrecking Crew by construction workers. They were proud, happy, and Jinx smiled along with them. But it didn't reach her eyes. Then it happened. Billy cracked a joke at Mammoth's expense, something about brains and wrecking balls, and before anyone could stop it, Mammoth picked up a glass bottle and hurled it straight at Billy. Billy ducked instinctively. The bottle didn't shatter. A loud thud echoed behind Billy. The room froze. All heads turned. Ashbourne stood in the doorway, completely still, holding the bottle in his hand. The room was dead silent. Ashbourne raised a brow, eyes scanning the frozen faces before him. "Throwing a glass bottle at me the moment I walk in," he said, dryly amused. "Really? Even if someone hates their boss, that's excessive, don't you think?" Mammoth's hands shot up. "It was an accident." Ashbourne tilted his head. "If that was an accident, I fear for what your intentions look like." The group stiffened, unsure if he was joking. Then Ashbourne chuckled and stepped forward. "Relax. I know it was an accident, I'm just messing with you. But if you must fight, do it outside. I'd rather not wake up one day buried in the rubble of my own home." Gizmo, looking unusually sheepish, scratched the back of his head. "Don't worry, boss. Won't happen again." Ashbourne smiled. "Good. And remember, Jinx is the one who cleans up your messes. Be considerate. Don't make her job harder." That made them all pause. He turned, plucked a slice of pizza from the box nearest him, and glanced back casually. "I'll be in my room. Stay here if you want. Just don't burn down the place." He started walking away, then added with a smirk, "Thanks for the pizza and the drink." He vanished down the hallway. The moment he was gone, Billy grinned wide and slapped his leg. "See? Told you the boss is cool and chill." The others nodded, relieved. "Anyone else would have at least yelled," Gizmo muttered, shaking his head. Jinx watched them with a strange feeling stirring in her chest. Maybe, just maybe, even if this wasn't where she wanted to be, she wasn't entirely alone. The sunlight seeped gently through the tall windows of the manor. The living room bore the signs of a small, unplanned sleepover. Pillows scattered, blankets half-draped over furniture, and 4 unconscious figures sprawled across the couches and floor. Ashbourne walked in, crisp and sharp in his dark suit. His gaze swept over the chaotic scene with amusement before settling on the only sign of movement. Jinx, mop in hand, wiping away a particularly sticky spot on the floor. "Good morning," he said, voice smooth and unhurried. "Didn't expect to see you up so early." Jinx glanced up and gave him a faint, tired smile. "It's my job," she said softly. "And kind of my fault the place got trashed." Ashbourne walked a few steps closer, casting a glance at the still snoring heap that was Mammoth and Billy entangled in a blanket on the floor. "It's fine," he replied with a casual shrug. "They're the ones who came here, after all. Besides," he turned to her with a small smile, "it would be bad for my reputation if you turned visitors away, right?" Jinx let out a small laugh and nodded. Ashbourne adjusted the cuff of his shirt. "I'm heading to Shadow Corp. Don't forget to wake the four up. If they overstay, the manor might collapse under their collective snoring." Jinx nodded again, more easily this time. "Got it." He turned toward the door, steps light but firm. As he reached for the handle, Jinx hesitated, then called out, "Boss." Ashbourne paused. "Thanks for giving us a chance," she said, her voice uncertain at first, then stronger. "And for being so accommodating." For a moment, Ashbourne didn't move. Then, without turning back, he simply replied, "You're welcome." The door clicked shut behind him, and Jinx stood quietly in the silence that followed. Mop still in hand. Despite the mess, despite the doubts, a small warmth settled in her chest. Lex Luthor sat behind his sleek desk, his fingers tapped rhythmically on a datapad as he reviewed reports. Financial projections, infrastructure progress, and recent defense systems upgrades. All standard, all efficient. Just the way he liked it. A soft knock preceded the quiet whoosh of the door sliding open. His trusted assistant Mercy Graves stepped in, her tone sharp and respectful. "Lex, your visitor is here." Lex didn't look up immediately. Only after finishing the last line of a report did he glance at her and nod. "Let him in." The door opened wider, and in stepped a man dressed far too flamboyantly for the environment. A deep purple coat, a matching hat, and a face painted in an all-too-familiar grinning clown makeup. The Joker? "Lexi, you're almost out of smiles today," Joker cackled as he removed his hat with a theatrical bow. "You know, sneaking into Metropolis unnoticed is so unfriendly to folks like me." Lex leaned back in his chair, folding his hands in front of him. "You're almost late." Joker strolled into the room, spinning his hat on one finger before plopping it onto a nearby table. Traffic was murder, literally. His grin widened as he placed a sleek, black briefcase on Lex's desk and opened it with a satisfying click. Inside was a single object nestled in a custom-molded case, glowing faintly. Lex's eyes narrowed. "You brought it." "Oh, I always keep my promises," Joker said with a low giggle. "Besides," he tapped the edge of the case, "this little beauty is going to make things so much fun." Lex allowed himself a rare, thin smile, cold, calculating. "Good." Everything is falling into place. The two men stared at the briefcase for a moment longer. Unbeknownst to them both, in the far corner of the room where the soft lighting met the deepest shadows, something shifted, subtle, almost imperceptible. A flicker in the darkness, a whisper of movement. The shadows settled once more, watching, listening, waiting. In one of Metropolis's most luxurious restaurants, the glittering lights and soft symphony music set the perfect backdrop for a gathering that was equal parts power and politics. The room was filled with influential business magnates, well-dressed executives, and reporters from the biggest papers in the world. Among them stood Lois Lane, clipboard in hand, ever the professional. Near the heart of the gathering, Lex Luthor stood in a dark charcoal suit, engaged in a casual yet calculated conversation with none other than Ashbourne Black, the enigmatic CEO of Shadow Corp. The two stood shoulder to shoulder like twin pillars of wealth and power. Then the crowd subtly shifted as Bruce Wayne made his entrance, radiating charm and confidence in equal measure. His name needed no announcement. The entire room noticed when he walked in. Looks turned and greeted Bruce with a familiar nod. "Mr. Wayne." Bruce smiled. "Lex." But his attention turned curiously to the man beside him. "And you must be Ashbourne Black," he said, offering a hand. "Been meaning to meet you. Your name travels faster than your reputation." Ashbourne took his hand with a warm, polite smile. "A pleasure. I've heard quite a bit about you as well." Bruce chuckled. "I have to ask, Ashbourne. That's unique. Real name?" Ashbourne nodded lightly, his tone casual. "Yes. My parents gave me that name. The hospital I was born in had a massive fire that night. Oddly enough, only our section of the building was untouched by the flames." Bruce raised his eyebrows. "That's poetic. Or dramatic," Lex added dryly. The three continued their exchange. a mixture of subtle probing and polite jabs. When Lois Lane approached them with her usual confidence, "Well, well," she said, with a grin. "Three of the richest men on the planet in one room. That's not a board meeting. That's a headline." Ashbourne offered a gentleman's bow of his head. "I'm not sure we're that interesting. Just three men in suits with too much money and not enough taste." Lois laughed. "You'd be surprised what interests people, Mr. Black." Her eyes briefly lingered on Bruce, sharp, knowing. She knew who he really was. Meanwhile, Lex smiled faintly, pleased. After all, he had ensured Lois received an invitation. The conversation continued pleasantly until the calm was shattered. A gunshot rang out. The music died. Screams erupted. Chaos bled into elegance. Men in clown masks burst in. Weapons raised. The restaurant froze. Standing tall among them, dressed to kill in bright chaos, were Joker and Harley Quinn. The air thickened with tension. Guests trembled. A waiter dropped his tray. But three individuals didn't flinch. Bruce Wayne's eyes narrowed, cool and calculating. Lex Luthor's expression remained calm, a small smirk tugging at his lips. And Ashbourne Black just kept smiling. In a voice just loud enough for Lex, Bruce, and Lois to hear. Ashbourne muttered, "I'm betting they will take Miss Lane as a hostage. Any takers?" The three stared at him, stunned by the casual remark. Lois whispered, "Shouldn't you be worried?" Ashbourne sipped from his wine glass. "Not really. They're probably here for you." Lex stiffened ever so slightly. How did he know that? Right on cue, the Joker strolled through the room with his signature bounce, scanning faces until his eyes landed on Lois. "Lois Lane," he beamed. "There you are?" For a second, I thought I crashed the wrong gala. Lois didn't reply. Instead, she glanced sideways at Ashbourne. Ashbourne merely shrugged. "Called it." Joker tilted his head. "You two are in on a joke, and I'm not part of it. Rude." Ashbourne met his eyes calmly. "I bet you would go after Miss Lane. Beauty, brains, beloved by the public. It's classic. Damsel in distress. Hero shows up. Let me guess. Superman, right?" He took another sip of wine, unbothered. Joker laughed. "You are funny." Then, with a sudden flare of movement, he pointed his gun at Ashbourne. "What if I shot you now?" Ashbourne didn't even blink. That would ruin the show. Violence before the guest of honor arrives. No taste. The Joker tilted his head, considering, "You get it." Then he lowered the gun as an idea struck him, and his grin widened. "What if I take you as a hostage instead?" Ashbourne looked genuinely thoughtful. "Not bad, but not as dramatic. You need two hostages. Force the hero to choose. High drama, tension, emotional damage." The Joker gasped in glee. "Yes, I like you already." He clapped his hands. "You two, it's settled. You're my main hostages." "Sounds fun." Ashbourne chuckled, then casually walked past him as he said, "Where do you want me to stand?" The Joker stared, wide-eyed. "I didn't expect to find a crazy person here. This is better than I imagined." With a giggle, he yanked Lois toward the center of the restaurant, as Harley held the crowd back. Lex and Bruce exchanged glances. They were calculating scenarios and backup plans, but one thing neither could shake was the thought, Ashbourne didn't just go off script. There was no script for whatever he was doing. Lois Lane sat tied to a chair at the center of the luxurious restaurant, now eerily quiet and transformed into a stage for madness. The fine decor stood in stark contrast to the chaos that had unfolded. Her eyes burned with frustration as she glanced toward the man calmly sipping his drink beside her. Ashbourne Black, ever composed, didn't seem the least bit concerned about the gun-wielding maniacs around them. His posture was relaxed, still smiling. "What are you playing at?" Lois hissed. "Seriously, what is this?" Ashbourne turned to her with a small smile. "Isn't it obvious?" He took another sip. "The hostage." Lucy's eye twitched. "You are enjoying this." She turned to the nearby Joker, calling out with a sarcastic tone, "Hey, can you at least be a gentleman and give me the same treatment as the other hostage? You know, equal treatment and all that." But it wasn't the Joker who answered. Ashbourne raised a hand in a mock, courteous gesture. "Ah, but you see, Miss Lane, you are the damsel in distress. A little rough treatment is expected. Adds to the drama. And let's be honest, your rebellious spirit doesn't exactly earn you sympathy points. Meanwhile, I'm just a humble businessman enjoying Mr. Joker's performance. We're not the same." Lou stared at him, baffled. "You're insane!" The Joker, however, threw his head back and laughed. I like this guy. Ashbourne gave a slight bow, like an actor at the end of a scene before returning to his upright, poised stance. Lois gave up. There was no reasoning with him. She couldn't tell if Ashbourne Black was a genius or just a lunatic. Meanwhile, Joker's goons continued their work, herding the other guests to the lower floor. Soon, the upper dining hall was left mostly empty, save for a few goons. Harley Quinn, the Joker, Ashbourne, and the increasingly annoyed Lois. Then down below, it happened. A blue blur zipped through the lower floor like lightning, striking fast and precise. One by one, the Joker's thugs were knocked out cold, left groaning or unconscious in moments. A voice, firm and familiar, echoed through the room. "Get out of here. I'll handle the rest." Superman had arrived. The hostages didn't need to be told twice. They ran. Among them, Lex Luthor slipped away, his sly smile betraying that this was all still part of some deeper plan. And Bruce Wayne, unnoticed in the shuffle, broke away from the crowd and disappeared into a side room, ready to return as someone else. Back upstairs, Ashbourne turned to the Joker, swirling his drink idly. "You should check on your goons." The Joker's head tilted. "Why?" "Because," Ashbourne said, "Superman will start with them. Then he'll come here. That'll be your cue. The announcement for the show." Joker stared at him, brows raised. Then he turned to Harley Quinn, who was already tapping on her earpiece. "Boys," she called, "report." No answer. Terry? Jaws? Lenny? Nothing. The Joker's expression slowly shifted from curiosity to manic delight. "Oh. Oh yes. The big scout is coming." With an excited grin, he yanked Lois Lane to her feet, wrapping one arm around her and pointing a gun to her head. "All right, curtains up," he shouted. "Boys, positions. The guest of honor is almost here." The remaining goons tensed, raising their weapons. Harley's smile faded, focus taking over. The room became a powder keg of anticipation. Ashbourne calmly stood on the side, drink still in hand, his smile unwavering as a goon pointed a gun to his head. Soon the grand double doors of the restaurant creaked open with a low groan, and a gust of wind signaled the arrival of Metropolis's champion. Superman floated inside, his red cape fluttering, his eyes immediately scanning the scene. Lois Lane was being held at gunpoint by the Joker, and not far from her, Ashbourne Black stood just as calmly with a gun to his head as well. Yet unlike Lois, who showed signs of tension, Ashbourne looked relaxed, too relaxed. Superman's brow furrowed slightly at the sight, but now wasn't the time to think about that. "Joker, you picked the wrong city. You should have stayed in Gotham," Superman said. Voice firm and low. The Joker cackled, completely unfazed. "Oh, but I needed a change of scenery, you know. And Metropolis? It just screams opportunity." With a flourish, he grinned. "Now I was just about to present your options, Supes. Two thrilling choices. First," but the Joker didn't finish. A blue streak flashed across the room. In the blink of an eye, all of the Joker's goons were on the floor, groaning or unconscious, Harley Quinn included. Then, with a sonic crack, the Joker himself was slammed into the ground, hard enough to crack the tile. Superman landed with a solid thud. The tension in the room completely flipped. He approached Lois with a reassuring smile. "Are you okay, Miss Lane?" Lucius, still shaken but smiling faintly, gave him a familiar look. "My hero?" Behind them, the Joker staggered up, his green hair messy, his makeup smudged. "Well, that was rude," he whined, holding his ribs. "Is that how heroes behave these days? Interrupting people mid-monologue? No class, really." Superman turned to face him, eyes stern and unwavering. "Metropolis isn't a place for your lunacy, Joker." Joker put on a mock-hurt face. "Lunacy? That's a little harsh. I like to think of it as creative disruption." And with a flourish, he pulled a dagger from inside his jacket and pointed it towards Superman. "The world needs more lunatics. Keeps things interesting." Superman stepped forward without hesitation. It was a knife, a joke. There was nothing it could do to him. But then the Joker pressed his thumb on the handle. The outer shell clattered to the floor, revealing a glowing green blade. Kryptonite. Superman stumbled back as the sickening wave of weakness swept through him. His knees buckled slightly. Kryptonite. The Joker didn't wait. With a manic cry of glee, he lunged forward and plunged the blade into Superman's abdomen. "What's the matter, Boy Scout?" "Not feeling so super anymore," the Joker howled with laughter as Superman collapsed, clutching his bleeding side, weakened and gasping. Lois screamed, fear flashing across her face. For the first time tonight, she truly felt fear. The Joker raised his blade, the tip aimed downward. "Now then," he whispered, "where to stab you next? Heart, spine, somewhere poetic?" But just as he was about to strike, bang! The Joker screamed, spinning away and clutching his bleeding hand. The kryptonite dagger clattered uselessly to the ground. Both the Joker and Lois turned, eyes wide. Ashbourne Black stood where he had been the entire time, same relaxed posture, same polite smile, but now holding a pistol, still aimed forward. He tilted his head slightly and spoke with the same soft tone. "An unexpected turn of events," Ashbourne said. "The drama you've been looking for, Mr. Joker, right?" The Joker stared at him in disbelief, still clutching his ruined hand, while Lois blinked, stunned. Superman, barely conscious, looked up at Ashbourne as if trying to understand what just happened. Ashbourne simply smiled and swirled the drink in his other hand. The restaurant was eerily silent, save for the shallow breathing of a wounded Superman and the distant sirens approaching outside. Ashbourne lowered his smoking pistol slightly, still standing with unnerving composure. He looked at the Joker, who was writhing in pain and clutching his bleeding hand. With the same polite smile etched across his face, Ashbourne tilted his head. "What do you think of my performance?" The Joker, despite his bloodied form and fractured body, let out a dry, wheezing laugh. "Pretty good. But you ruined the ending." Ashbourne's smile widened just a bit. "I gave it a surprising twist." He lifted his glass in mock cheer. "The hostage is the last one standing." The Joker was still chuckling when he shifted his weight, ever so slightly, trying to reach for something. But Ashbourne didn't wait. Bang, bang, bang. 3 shots echoed in rapid succession. One slammed into the Joker's shoulder, the other 2 buried into his legs. The madman collapsed fully, his laughter choking into a sharp cry of agony. Ashbourne didn't blink, he exhaled softly. Another twist would make the moment boring. Across the room, the groggy Harley Quinn stirred. When she saw the Joker down, her voice rose in a shriek. "Poding!" Her eyes flared with wild rage as she stumbled up and charged at Ashbourne, teeth bared. Ashbourne didn't flinch, he simply waited. When Harley got close enough, bang! The bullet struck her thigh, sending her tumbling forward with a pained yelp. She hit the ground hard, arms scrambling. She tried to rise, but bang! A clean shot to her shoulder knocked her flat again, a pained scream escaping her lips as she collapsed, twitching. Ashbourne lowered his weapon once more, exhaled softly through his nose, and resumed his casual stance, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. The smoke from the gun curled upward in lazy spirals. Superman, still weak but conscious, looked at Ashbourne with visible confusion and a tinge of awe. Lois, on the other hand, simply stared at Ashbourne in a stunned silence, trying to decide if he was the hero of the night. Ashbourne glanced at them both, his voice smooth as ever. "Shall we call that curtain closed?" A gruff voice echoed from the restaurant entrance, sharp and commanding. Ashbourne Black, put the gun down. All eyes turned to the new figure entering the scene, cloaked in shadows, dark armor gleaming beneath the broken lights. "That man?" Ashbourne turned his head slightly, smile still perfectly in place. "You're far away from your turf, don't you think so?" From the ground, bloodied but grinning, Joker let out a strained chuckle. "Baxley couldn't bear staying far from me and came to find me. How touching." Ashbourne hummed thoughtfully, tilting his head. "Is that so? Are you here for him?" Batman didn't answer. He stepped forward silent as ever, his eyes narrowed behind the cowl. Ashbourne's smile only widened as he turned his attention back to the Joker. "Hearing your news, I always thought there's some kind of twisted bro code between you two. Some warped version of bros before hoes, but the more I look at it, I think it's deeper than that." Joker blinked. "That's defamation," he huffed, then added, "I'm not into that. The relationship between me and Batsy is pure." Ashbourne gave a solemn nod, as though he were truly touched. A pure love without sexual interest. Rare, but not impossible." He sighed with a mock tear. "Truly touching. You two are a pair made for each other." Silence followed. Even Superman, still groaning in pain on the floor, seemed caught off guard by the direction of the conversation. Joker finally broke the silence. "This is not how I want to be remembered with Batsy." Lozy groaned. "Can you take this seriously?" Ashbourne gave a casual shrug with both hands. Then, bang! Another shot rang through the air. Gasps filled the room as the smoke curled up from the barrel of Ashbourne's gun aimed squarely between Batman's legs. Batman's eyes widened. A guttural grunt escaped him as he collapsed to his knees, arms instinctively curling to shield himself. Ashbourne winced sympathetically. Oops. He dropped the gun to the floor with a clatter and held up his hands innocently. Misfire. Please ignore it. He glanced at the writhing vigilante. Luckily, Mr. Batman's ballistic cup is rated for small arms fire. Might still need an ice pack, though. Lowe stared in disbelief at the quickly paling Batman struggling to breathe through the pain. Even Joker blinked in shock before speaking. You really should be more careful with that thing. Could hurt someone. Ashbourne gave him an apologetic nod. Sorry about that. He turned his attention to Harley Quinn, still groaning on the floor. Miss Quinn, you have my sympathies, he said in a surprisingly sincere tone. The man you love has another man in his heart. It's truly tragic, the life you're leading. I sincerely hope you'll find yourself a new boyfriend, or girlfriend. Harley whimpered something incoherent as Ashbourne stepped forward, picked up the kryptonite dagger from the floor, and admired it with a curious look. I'll keep this as a souvenir. He looked around the room once more, carnage and chaos painted in every direction. And I think I should run before a big angry bat recovers. With perfect calm, Ashbourne Black walked out of the restaurant, leaving behind him a room full of broken heroes, wounded villains, and utter confusion. The next day, the world awoke in disbelief. News outlets exploded with headlines, social media flooded with memes, reactions, and furious debates, and the internet groaned under the weight of one video. Surveillance footage from the restaurant, uncut, unfiltered, and surreal, had leaked to the public. It began with the Joker's goons swarming in, guns drawn, taking hostages with theatrical flair. Then came Superman, arriving like a divine savior. Gasps turned to cheers, until he was taken down. A kryptonite dagger, buried deep in his side, brought the Man of Steel to his knees, and just as the video seemed to reach peak insanity, in walked Ashbourne Black, and everything changed. The man's casual stance, his casual talk with the Joker, his relaxed and amused stance, and then the arrival of Batman. But it was the moment that came after that broke the internet. Ashbourne's gun misfiring, a shot fired directly between Batman's legs, the Dark Knight collapsing with a groan that haunted viewers worldwide. The world collectively gasped, then paused, then rewound the footage. Then rewound it again, then turned it into a meme. When the city needs you, but your balls say no. Some called the video fake, a prank, a Joker-inspired hoax. The internet simply couldn't accept it. Superman being stabbed was one thing, but Batman getting shot in the balls, that was too far. And yet, the footage continued. The Joker, stunned. Harley, down. Ashbourne, smirking like a man who knew he just became a legend. Then came the arrival of the Flash, moving like lightning, blurring into the frame to retrieve the fallen Superman and a very delicate-looking Batman, vanishing again in an instant. The police issued an official statement soon after. The video is authentic. Mr. Ashbourne Black's actions fall under justified self-defense. The injury sustained by Batman was the result of an unfortunate accident. No permanent damage was reported, probably. The world was still reeling when a reporter finally caught up with Ashbourne, asking the question on everyone's mind. Why were you carrying a gun at a gala? Ashbourne, with his signature smile and a nonchalant shrug, answered, a rich businessman from Gotham attending a high-profile gala with other rich and influential people. Isn't that exactly the kind of place Gotham criminals attack? It sounded ridiculous, and yet the logic was bulletproof. Of course criminals would show up. Of course he was armed. The people loved it. Commentators and influencers dubbed him Batsbane Ballbreaker Black, and the rich nutter who saved the day. Joker and his gang were sent back to prison bruised, broken, and injured. Ashbourne Black, meanwhile, was celebrated, awards were whispered, invitations to talk shows poured in. He was hailed as the fearless, eccentric businessman who stared death in the face, mocked it, and walked away with a souvenir dagger and the internet's eternal respect. But the truth? Ashbourne hadn't gone there to be a hero. He'd gone for the fun, and he got it with a side of kryptonite blade, international fame, and the priceless memory of making Batman drop like a sack of potatoes. In the towering, pristine halls of LexCorp, the air practically crackled with rage. Lex Luthor stood by the panoramic glass window of his office, jaw tight, hand clenched around the edge of a data tablet. His usually composed demeanor was beginning to crack. The footage had looped in his head endlessly, Superman bleeding, brought to his knees. It should have been his moment, the final move in a carefully orchestrated play. A successful kryptonite strike was a 1 in a million opportunity. And now, it was gone. Wasted. He'll be on guard now, Lex muttered to himself. He'll scan everything. He'll expect traps, and kryptonite isn't exactly growing on trees. He turned away from the window and eyed the sleek display monitor on his desk. A single message blinked on the screen, one he'd read multiple times that morning, each word grinding further into his nerves. From Ashbourne Black, I traced the source of Lois Lane's invitation. It seems she got in through one of your business associates. Fascinating, isn't it? Last night was fun. Thank you. Lex exhaled sharply, the tension in his chest flaring into fire. Ashbourne hadn't made a direct accusation. He didn't have to. The tone was smug, that irritating blend of sarcastic civility and undeniable sharpness. Lex could feel the implication beneath the words, a veiled acknowledgement, a smirk hidden. Damn him, Lex muttered, fingers drumming on the desk. He played me. For a moment, he seriously considered calling in one of his less savory contacts, an assassin, a warning, a silencing. But the thought dissolved as quickly as it came. Ashbourne was not an enemy. Not yet. He was unpredictable. Yes, dangerously intelligent, even more so. But he had shown no interest in virtue. The man had interfered for self-amusement, not justice. He was not even aware of the situation ahead of time. And that was useful. Still, Lex added a mental note. Never underestimate him again. Back in Gotham, in a darkened cave of Wayne Manor, the Bat Cave, the atmosphere was no less grim. Bruce Wayne sat slouched in his chair, a rare look of emotional defeat etched on his face. His phone buzzed again. Another concerned text from a colleague. The previous one had been from Oliver Queen, asking if he should send an emergency ice pack. But the one that stung the most was Alfred's question, do you still possess the necessary equipment to ensure a Wayne heir, Master Bruce? The family tree is concerned. Bruce growled and tossed the phone on the ground. He had watched the video multiple times. He had seen the shot, the flash, the angle, the stupid oops face Ashbourne made. And he had seen his own knees hit the floor in what would soon become the most replayed fall in superhero history. Humiliation wasn't unfamiliar to Bruce. But this was different. He tapped into the back computer, pulling up Ashbourne Black's records. Everything looked normal. Too normal. No criminal history, no under-the-table dealings, no dark files, just eccentric habits, absurd investments, and a reputation for being both brilliant and unmanageable. Too much money and too much brain, Bruce muttered. A dangerous combination. He leaned back, piecing together a profile. Ashbourne Black is confident, fearless, and deeply intelligent. He follows rules, but is not strictly adhered to the normal moral codes. A chaos element. A wild card. Not a villain, but not a hero either. You're not a threat, Bruce said. Not yet. But evaluation would continue, because a man who could shoot Batman in the groin, on accident or not, and walk away grinning, he couldn't be ignored. Ashbourne Black sat comfortably in the middle of an expensive, oversized couch. The room around him was bright and modern, with a wall-sized aquarium casting shifting blue light across the polished floor. But the luxury of the space wasn't what made it feel crowded today. It was the 5 ex-villains surrounding him, each wearing a strangely similar expression of exasperation and worry. Jinx stood with her arms crossed, eyes narrowed, while Gizmo was pacing back and forth, muttering to himself. Mammoth leaned against the wall silently like a frowning statue, while Kydwigid and Billy Numerous sat side by side on the edge of a sleek coffee table, both clearly trying to find the right words. You need a bodyguard, Jinx said flatly, not even waiting for pleasantries. It's not a debate, boss. Ashbourne looked up from the glass of wine in his hand, one eyebrow raised. I just survived a dinner party with Joker, and came out with a free dagger. I think I'm doing fine. You were lucky, Jinx said, waving a hand. That guy had a kryptonite blade. That was serious. You don't always get to charm your way through madness. I didn't charm anything. I just didn't panic, Ashbourne replied with a cool smile. Which was impressive, Billy said with a grin. But still, you're not bulletproof. Or laserproof. Or swordproof. Or... I get it, Ashbourne interrupted gently. Jinx stepped forward, arms still crossed, but her tone more intense now. Let me do it. My powers are perfect for messing with people who get too close. I can twist their luck into a living nightmare. You won't even know I'm there unless someone's threatening you. Ashbourne chuckled. That almost sounded romantic. Jinx didn't smile. I'm serious. I know, Ashbourne replied, standing up and setting the wine glass down. He looked around at the small group. I appreciate the sentiment, all of you. It's touching in a dysfunctional, chaotic sort of way. But, Mammoth rumbled, arms folded over his broad chest. But I don't need a bodyguard. I can take care of myself. There was a silence that followed, heavy and annoyed. Gizmo huffed and threw his hands in the air. You're too fearless for your own good. The first time we met, we almost kidnapped you. Now it was the Joker. What is next? He snapped. At least I'm building something. Something small, portable, subtle, like a defense drone or an invisible laser field or a self-healing vest. Something you won't even notice. Ashbourne tilted his head. Would it make you feel better? Yes, Gizmo and Jinx said in unison. Ashbourne gave a soft sigh and smiled. Very well, but just one gadget. No armies of drones following me. Gizmo immediately walked off, already pulling out a small device and typing. As Ashbourne stepped out of the room, waving a hand back at the group, the others all watched him go with varying degrees of frustration. He's gonna get himself killed, Jinx muttered, slumping onto the couch. Yeah, Gizmo agreed. And he's too stubborn to let us help. Unless we stalk him, Billy suggested, only to receive a smack on the head from Jinx. No stalking, Mammoth said. He said no, we listen. Jinx sighed. He's our boss, and a lunatic. But he's our lunatic, Billy added with a smirk. And in the silence that followed, they all agreed without saying a word. Ashbourne Black walked through the bustling streets of Metropolis. His sharp black suit contrasted the city's casual morning energy, but he moved as if he belonged. No, as if the city itself bent slightly to make way for him. The suggestion of a bodyguard still played in his mind more as a joke than a serious proposal. Him, protected. He chuckled to himself. He didn't need someone watching his back, and as for those powers of his, he had no desire to share that with anyone. Some cards were better left close to the chest. Just then, the sharp beat of helicopter blades sliced through the city's usual rhythm. Ashbourne tilted his head toward the sky, watching a military-style chopper weaving erratically through the skyline. Trailing it, focused and fierce, was Supergirl. The side door of the helicopter slid open, revealing a gunman with a heavy machine gun. He opened fire at Supergirl, rounds sprang, but the bullets simply bounced off her. Supergirl responded quickly. Darting forward and grabbing the tail of the helicopter, the aircraft spun from the force, spiraling toward the nearest rooftop before crashing through it and slamming down to the street below. People screamed and added in a panic as debris rained from above, but Supergirl's grip remained steady, ensuring the crash didn't turn catastrophic. Ashbourne didn't flinch. His walk continued, uninterrupted. The crash site happened to be the very coffee shop he'd been heading to. How inconvenient! He stepped over a crumpled light pole, past a collapsed wall, and sidestepped a sparking cable as he reached the cafe entrance. The helicopter was barely feet away, smoke rising from its broken chassis, but he didn't so much as glance at it. Neither the shaken gunman nor the still hovering Supergirl noticed him. Inside, he ordered his usual blend, waited patiently, still ignoring the chaos outside, and left exactly 3 minutes later, coffee cup in hand. Outside now, he found a gathering had formed. Superman stood beside an angry Supergirl, speaking to her in a calm, quiet voice. Lois Lane stood just off to the side, phone in hand, but not recording, observing with a mixture of curiosity and exasperation. Ashbourne approached, raising his coffee and greeting. Mornin'! Fine weather for a city brawl, don't you think? Superman turned first, a flicker of recognition flashing in his eyes. Mr. Black, it's good to see you again. Is this another kidnapping attempt, Miss Lane? Ashbourne asked lightly, sipping his coffee. Lois looked at him, her eyes twitched, lips tightening in that way they did when someone got under her skin. You're unbelievable, Superman chuckled, quietly. Unfortunately, yes, and I've been meaning to thank you for the other night. I was preoccupied. It's fine, Ashbourne replied. Honestly, I expected a vacation after being stabbed, but I suppose that's not how you work. It's not exactly a pleasant experience, Superman agreed. But I've fully recovered. Supergirl finally looked at Ashbourne with dawning recognition. Wait a second. Ballbreaker Black. Ashbourne gave a theatrical bow. In the flesh, though I'd appreciate not being called that. Sounds rather unpleasant, and I'm fairly certain Batman despises me now. I'll be avoiding Gotham for a while. After all, I am the one who broke his balls. Supergirl laughed out loud, despite herself. Superman gave a weary sigh. He's definitely not happy with you, he confirmed. Ashbourne reached into his jacket pocket and handed Lois a sleek black card. For the annoyance I caused you the other night, he said. That's the number of one of the best breast cancer specialists in the country. Call him. Any checkups or medical bills are on me. Lois blinked, caught off guard. That's an unconventional gift, she said, narrowing her eyes at the card. Ashbourne gave a small nod, figured it might be useful. You're exposed to X-rays on a daily basis, after all. Lois's eyebrows knit together in confusion, as did Kara's. Superman's smile faltered. Ashbourne gestured casually at the Man of Steel. I mean, he's always looking through things. We don't know how alien X-rays work. Better safe than sorry, right? Superman's jaw tightened. It would never do that. What do you think of me? Ashbourne paused, then replied with careful consideration. A straight male with gifted eyes. Superman's face darkened several shades. Lois slowly turned to him, suddenly looking a little unsettled. Kara burst into laughter, doubling over as the tension in the air cracked like glass. Well, my coffee's getting cold, Ashbourne said, raising his cup again. Farewell. And with that, he turned and resumed his walk as if nothing unusual had happened. As if helicopters didn't crash next to cafes and his conversation with them was part of the morning routine. Lois watched him go. I can't figure him out, she admitted. He's not like any rich guy I've met before. He's not, Superman agreed after a moment of contemplation. He was too calm that night, too relaxed, and even now, walking around Metropolis on foot without a bodyguard or attendant, Lex would have never done that. Lois nodded and said, and just now he threw a jab at you. He is too reckless and fearless. There was a report, Superman said thoughtfully, that he went to Jump City alone. Could have been kidnapped if the Teen Titans didn't show up in time. What? When was this? Lois asked, genuinely surprised. Superman replied, not long ago, and he still had lunch with the people trying to kidnap him and offered them legal jobs. Lois shook her head in disbelief. That guy is something else. Supergirl had a thoughtful look on her face. He's interesting. I'll give him that. A month had passed in relative calm, or as calm as life could be when you were Ashbourne Black. But now, he found himself at the heart of a federal investigation. The reason? His partnership with none other than Lex Luthor. Luthor Corp had come under intense scrutiny following allegations of illegal weapons trafficking, and when the authorities opened that door, they didn't just peer into Lex's life, they kicked it off the hinges and stormed through, dragging every associate into the light. That included Ashbourne. Whether he liked it or not, he didn't mind. Ashbourne, unlike most men, truly had nothing to hide. His records were clean, his operations legitimate, and his connections, while sometimes shady in appearance, were more a matter of convenience than criminality. What irked him wasn't the attention, but the stupidity of the whole ordeal. The entire investigation had started from a public accusation by Superman. No hard evidence, no formal intelligence report, just Superman pointing a finger at Lex Luthor. And somehow, that was enough to launch a legal circus. It was absurd. If Superman's word is all it takes, Ashbourne had muttered during an interview, why not just toss Lex in prison and save everyone the paperwork? Once his part in the process was over, Ashbourne stepped out into the sunlight, loosened his tie, and pulled out his phone. A few taps later, the line connected. Lex, he said with a grin in his voice, how are you holding up? Superman seems hell-bent on throwing you in a cell. A snort came from the other end. Nothing will come of this, Lex replied. Nothing ever does. They poke around, find nothing, and move on, until the next tantrum Superman throws. Ashbourne looked through the window, watching Metropolis traffic pass. I really do wonder why you go this far against him. Seems like a waste of resources for someone as meticulous as you. There was silence for a moment. Then Lex's voice came back, colder, because he doesn't belong here. He's not human, yet they look at him like he's some god, like he's the best of us. He's not. He was born with power beyond anything we could imagine. He didn't earn it. He didn't build it. He woke up one day and could fly. What does that teach the world? That strength and morality come from birth. That the best man is the one who fell from the sky. Lex's tone grew sharper. I built everything I have. Every inch of my empire. Every invention. Every advancement. I clawed it into existence. And still, the moment Superman shows up, I'm the villain. I'm the one under suspicion. I'm the one who needs to prove himself while he gets celebrated just for existing. Ashbourne was quiet for a beat before answering. You'll never receive the same recognition he has, Lex. No effort or achievement you put forward will get you the same result. Lex's voice cracked with frustration. I'm better than him. Maybe, Ashbourne replied smoothly, but it doesn't matter. You'll never take his place, because you're human. There was silence on the line, but Ashbourne could practically hear the tension on the other end. You're smarter than every man on this planet, richer too. They can't touch your level. You know that? And deep down, they do too. But because you're human, they'll always think, if I had what he had, maybe I could do the same. He paused, letting that truth hang in the air. But Superman, he's alien. Different. A friendly alien. Sure, but not one of them. So they don't compare themselves to him. They just believe. He's their savior. Their impossible hope. To them, he is someone given power and a choice to either be savior or tyrant. He chose the former. Ashbourne's voice lowered. You want to take his place? Then give the world everything. Your money, your brilliance, your life. Be selfless. Only then people will remember you the same way. Another moment passed before Lex finally spoke. I don't want to be remembered like him. Ashbourne's smile returned. Of course not, but if you want to replace him, that's not the way to do it. You can find a way to brainwash the world to worship you. You can kill him, you can become ruler. But it will always be empty. You only need to be selfless and you will get the same treatment. You make it sound simple, Lex scoffed. Because it is. Want me to prove it to you? It won't take much time to see results. Ashbourne replied. Lex narrowed his eyes and then smiled, saying, let me see what you can do. He ended the call. Ashbourne had a smile on his face. He had a plan. The world awoke to a headline no one expected. Ashbourne Black, owner and CEO of Shadow Corp, files lawsuit against Supergirl. Social media exploded. News anchors scrambled to get live opinions from legal experts and city officials. Every network ran the same images, shots of collapsing buildings, insurance claims gone bankrupt, and civilians injured during the collateral chaos left in the wake of Supergirl's recent battles. Ashbourne Black had made his move, suing one of Earth's young and beloved heroes. His allegations were laid out in brutal clarity. Supergirl's attempts at heroism had caused more damage to Metropolis than if the criminals were simply left to escape. The cost of repair, the endangered lives, the rising insurance premiums, it all painted a damning picture. Multiple insurance companies, especially ones hit hard over the years by incidents involving both Supergirl and Superman, stepped forward with testimonies. For them, this was long overdue. The world held its breath. Would Supergirl come to court and defend herself? Or would she act like a being above the laws of man? The court made its move, the summons was official, and the trial was to be televised. For the first time, a Kryptonian would stand before a jury of humans. In a penthouse overlooking the city, Lex Luthor narrowed his eyes at the broadcast. Ashbourne was suing Supergirl. He scoffed. What's he playing at now? Lex murmured, folding his arms. Smearing a hero's reputation? I tried that. It never sticks. This will blow up in his face. Yet, a twinge of curiosity crept in. Ashbourne always played a different game. On the day of the trial, the courthouse was surrounded by cameras and onlookers. Ashbourne Black arrived first. Sharp suit, calm expression, and his ever-present air of quiet confidence. His lawyer, a middle-aged woman, with a tired but razor-sharp gaze, walked beside him. Minutes later, Supergirl entered with Superman at her side. Her jaw was tight, her fists clenched. She glared straight ahead, only glancing once toward the plaintiff's bench, where Ashbourne sat sipping water as unbothered as if this was a brunch. Superman gave Ashbourne a glance of his own, subtle but wary. What is this young man planning? Was this a retaliation for the investigation into Lex? The timing was too convenient. First Lex, now Kara. Supergirl, on the other hand, wasn't subtle at all. She stared daggers into Ashbourne's skull. This smug bastard dragged her into a trial, a public one. And over what? Saving lives? She wanted nothing more than to put him through a wall. The judge entered. The jury sat. The bailiff called for order. The trial began. Prosecutor, you may begin, the judge said, adjusting his glasses. The prosecutor stood but only said one thing. Mr. Ashbourne Black would like to speak as a witness. The judge blinked, confused. That's not the usual start to things, but given the nature of this case, fine, proceed. Ashbourne rose and made his way to the stand, calm and measured. He sat, adjusted the mic, and began speaking. Not long ago, he said, Supergirl intervened with a rogue helicopter. The result was a crash near civilians. A building was damaged, and lives were endangered. Superman, who was present, clearly disagreed with her actions. They argued. Supergirl's eyes glowed red for a moment. Her rage was boiling over, but Ashbourne didn't even glance at her. This, he continued, was not an isolated incident. She's strong, noble even, but reckless. This cannot continue. The room was silent. People braced for an attack on her character, or worse, some motion for imprisonment or exile. But Ashbourne's tone shifted. However, he said, no one can deny that she wants to help, but she is not like her cousin. Superman grew up here. He understands us. He acts like us. Supergirl doesn't. Not yet. A pause. So this case isn't about punishment, it's about integration. We're not asking to imprison her or exile her. That would be a loss for Earth. Instead, we ask that she be sentenced to social service. The courtroom broke into whispers. Ashbourne raised his voice. She will work in construction, building homes for the homeless, repairing damage, working alongside human engineers, learning the value of creation, learning how to control her power and act with clear judgment. The materials will be provided by Shadow Corp, as well as staff and resources. I believe this will teach her more about this world than flying above it ever could. The trial is a formality, and to make Superman ensure her cooperation with us. Then, he turned fully to Supergirl. You want to be like your cousin? He asked. That won't happen by punching criminals from the sky. You must live with us, not above us. Ashbourne stood. That's all my side will present. The defendant may respond as they wish. We will raise no further witnesses or objections. He walked back and took his seat. Supergirl and Superman were stunned. Her lawyer, just as blindsided, asked for a recess. The judge, more confused than irritated now, agreed. Nothing about this case had followed traditional form, and frankly, he'd given up on normal expectations. An hour later, the lawyer returned with a troubled expression. We have nothing to add. Sometimes later, the judge leaned forward. Then it is decided, a bang of the gavel. Supergirl is hereby sentenced to 1 year of mandatory social service under the leadership and guidance of Shadow Corp, with duties focused on construction and public infrastructure. The courtroom erupted in a mix of applause, gasps, and flashes from 100 cameras. Supergirl sat frozen. Superman remained composed, but his mind raced. He couldn't help but wonder if this strange trial, so deliberately twisted from the norm, was just the beginning of a bigger plan. Ashbourne simply leaned back, relaxed as ever, as the world around him tried to understand what just happened. The courthouse was still swarmed with reporters and flashing cameras when Ashbourne Black walked out. Unlike most public figures involved in groundbreaking legal drama, he gave no statements, no sound bites, and certainly no interviews. To every journalist that swarmed his path, he simply said, the trial was clear. We begin work tomorrow. It was all he offered, but it was enough. That single sentence sent reporters into a frenzy, rushing to draft headlines and opinion pieces. Social media boiled over with debate, praise, and outrage. The idea of a superhero being ordered into social labor wasn't just unprecedented, it was transformative. Ashbourne didn't linger. He returned straight to Shadow Corp HQ. Reaching his office, Ashbourne stepped in, removed his suit jacket, and walked to the large glass windows overlooking the city. He unlocked the latches and pushed them open. Seconds later, 2 high-speed blurs sliced through the sky and landed inside, Superman and Supergirl. Superman's cape fluttered slightly behind him as he asked, How did you know we were waiting? Ashbourne turned with a faint, amused smile. The two of you were glaring at me the entire trial. I figured you'd want to chat away from microphones and cameras. If you didn't come in 10 seconds, I'd have closed the windows and assumed I was wrong. Supergirl clenched her fists at the sight of that smug smile. She really wanted to punch him. Superman, however, stood still, studying Ashbourne with sharp, calculating eyes. What are you planning? He asked. Ashbourne gave a half shrug. To have super construction girl build houses, putting her talents to something more productive. Supergirl took a step forward, her eyes glowing faintly. Superman stopped her with a calm hand on her shoulder. Ashbourne raised a brow. I'm giving you the best shot you'll ever have at building a real life on Earth. Your anger is unreasonable. You put me through a trial, like some kind of a criminal. Supergirl snapped. Ashbourne nodded, because it was easier that way. The moment I met you a month ago, I saw it in your eyes, stubbornness. I figured we'd save time by forcing change rather than asking for it. Supergirl clenched her jaw, her whole body radiating tension. Superman's tone grew firmer. Is this related to the Lex investigation? Ashbourne's eyes twinkled with amusement. You could say that. What are you two playing at? Superman pressed. Ashbourne leaned casually against his desk. Nothing really. I asked Lex why he hated you so much. We talked. One thing led to another, and I decided to show him a different way to play the game. He paused for a moment, then continued. But don't worry, I'm not planning anything harmful toward you, or your cousin. If anything, this social service will help her more than any hero quest will ever do. Superman narrowed his eyes. If you try anything, if you commit any crime... Ashbourne chuckled. You and Lex, you're a lot alike. We are nothing alike, Superman said coldly. Ashbourne tilted his head. Perhaps. After all, you were raised by kind people on a farm. Superman froze, eyes immediately glowing red. How do you know that? Ashbourne's grin widened. Told you, like Lex, you reveal too much when you're emotional. Your reaction to my random guess just confirmed that at least one of your adoptive parents is still alive and lives in a rural area. Superman's fists tensed, his posture stiffened. Ashbourne raised a calming hand. Relax, I have no interest in harming anyone. I don't stalk families. I don't commit crimes. Unlike Lex, I don't have an ego that needs public worship. Superman stepped forward, voice low and threatening. If I even hear about someone poking around my parents, if you so much as think about hurting them, you'll regret it. Ashbourne didn't flinch. He turned to Supergirl instead, smile still in place. Tomorrow morning, report here, he said. We'll assign your team and the project you're going to work on. For a moment, the Kryptonians stood in silence, trading glances with Ashbourne and each other. Then, without a word, they turned and flew off through the open window. Ashbourne walked back to his desk and stretched, cracking his neck. Messing with serious people is always fun, he muttered to himself. High above the building, Superman's ears caught every word. His jaw tightened. And for the first time in years, he felt the urge to hit someone who hadn't committed a single crime. Not yet. At least. Back in the office, Ashbourne sat alone at his desk, leisurely sipping a cup of black tea he just ordered, when the call notification blinked on the screen. It was Lex. He pressed a key and the video call opened, revealing the sharp, focused eyes of Lex Luthor on the other end. Ashbourne didn't miss a beat. Hope you enjoyed the trial, he said casually, the smile already forming on his face. Lex didn't bother with pleasantries. What are you planning? He asked bluntly. Why go through the effort of putting Supergirl on trial, only to request community service at the end? Ashbourne leaned back in his chair, the smile on his face unshaken. She's doing too much damage, that much is true. But she's not beyond redemption. With time, she'll learn. She'll adapt. All I did was spend a bit of money to make this public and get her to work for me. Lex narrowed his eyes, still unconvinced. Ashbourne continued. She'll help me with construction, speed up my development projects for practically nothing. Meanwhile, the public will believe any heroism she shows later was thanks to me, that I gave them a superhero instead of a reckless alien. He lifted his cup for another sip, voice calm and confident. I only stand to gain from this. It's completely legal. Lex remained silent, his expression unreadable. Then Ashbourne's smile widened, his tone shifting slightly, still light, but with a sharper edge. I do a few more stunts like this, and you'll find people trusting my word as much as they trust Superman's. Maybe more. Even Superman will be on my side eventually, as he realizes that he misjudged me. What do you think? For a moment, Lex said nothing. He saw the brilliance in the strategy. It was clean, clever, and insidious. It didn't challenge Superman head-on, didn't scream war. It whispered influence. And that made it dangerous. Still, Lex's pride refused to be impressed. I'm not interested in matching Superman's image or becoming his friend, Lex said coldly. I wanted to crush him. I want the world to look at him the way they look at insects. Small, weak. Ashbourne's smile didn't fade, but his eyes gleamed with interest as Lex added, "But for now, let's see how things go for you." With that, Lex ended the call. The screen went dark. Ashbourne stared at it for a few seconds longer, then leaned back in his chair, chuckling softly to himself. He was enjoying every second of this. Flying just above the clouds, Superman and Supergirl soared in silence, the sun casting a golden glow over the distant cityscape below. The wind roared past them, but between the two Kryptonians, the tension was louder. Kara finally broke the silence, crossing her arms mid-flight and muttering, "You should have punched that annoying smile off his face." Kalat sighed, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "Trust me," he said. "I felt like doing that, but Ashbourne Black hasn't committed any crimes." The words hung in the air for a moment. Kara glanced at her cousin, surprised by the weight in his voice. There was something else there, concern. Kal-El was silent for another moment, then added, "Kara, be careful around Ashbourne. He's intelligent, sly, more so than Lex Luthor." Kara blinked, visibly startled. "Wait, more than Lex? Come on, he's a jerk." "Sure, but that's a high praise." "I'm not praising him," Kal replied grimly. "I'm warning you." Kara's eyes narrowed slightly, her curiosity piqued. "Why do you think that?" Superman's jaw tensed, the memory fresh in his mind. He knows how to read people, how to manipulate them. He plays several steps ahead. During our talk, I looked at his heart rate, and it didn't change once. Not even when I threatened him. No fear, no worry. Kara looked troubled, but Kal wasn't finished. "Same thing happened during his meeting with Joker," he said, turning to her. The Joker's goon had a gun to his head, and Ashbourne just sipped his drink with an amused look. Like it was nothing. Kara's expression turned serious. There were few who could remain composed under the Joker's insanity. That kind of detachment, that smile, was more than unnerving. Superman gave her a deep look, his voice firm. "He's dangerous, Kara. Be careful what you say around him, what you do, and what information you share. He sees more than he lets on." Kara nodded slowly, her earlier frustration with Ashbourne now mixed with a heavy unease. She wasn't looking forward to the future, and now, more than ever, she knew she had to tread carefully. The gravel crunched beneath Ashbourne's boots as he stepped onto the grounds of his family villa, the familiar silence of the old estate welcoming him back. It had been several days since he last returned, his attention absorbed by the trial, press, and the sudden spotlight thrown on Supergirl. He had no intentions of dealing with anything tonight. Just games, just movies, just silence. He pushed open the grand door, the dim light of the chandelier casting long shadows in the entryway. Dropping his coat by the stairs, he made his way toward the lounge, only to pause at the sound of a familiar voice. "Back already," Jinx said, lounging on one of the velvet couches, legs up and eyes lazily fixed on the television. "Didn't expect the mighty boss to return so soon. That trial was something else, though. Never thought I'd see the day a hero got sentenced to community service." Ashbourne raised an eyebrow and offered a casual shrug. "Everything has a first time." Jinx tilted her head and narrowed her eyes playfully. "So, what are you planning next?" He smirked and stepped further into the room. "Honestly, I was thinking video games. Maybe a movie. Then I'll head out in the morning." Jinx blinked. "Wait, you play video games?" Ashbourne chuckled. "Got a console in my room. I come back here just to relax sometimes. Can't have Shadow Corp thinking I work all the time." Jinx sat up. Interest suddenly piqued. "I've been wanting to play with someone for a while now. You down?" He glanced at her, surprised but not displeased. "Sounds fun." A few minutes later, the two were nestled in the dimly lit comfort of Ashbourne's private room. The large screen flickered to life as they each grabbed a controller. The tension of the outside world melted away with every click, shout, and laugh. Between loading screens and competitive banter, their conversation shifted. "Hey boss," Jinx said casually, eyes fixed on the screen. "You ever dated anyone?" Ashbourne didn't miss a beat. "Nope, not looking for anything like that right now. I don't mind a one-night stand here and there for fun, but relationships? Nah, too busy." His answer was direct, honest, and unapologetic. But behind those words was something deeper, a lifetime lived, or more precisely, long lifetime. In his past life, he had experienced romance, but centuries of war taught him to enjoy the smaller things first. Long commitment can always wait. He had all the time in the world. Jinx was quiet for a moment, her mind wandering. He was attractive, successful, mysterious, and despite his quirks, strangely charming. She found herself wondering what it would be like to be with someone like him. But the answer seemed obvious. He wasn't interested in love. Maybe never would be. Still, his mention of casual encounters lingered in her mind. That old saying played on repeat. There's no such thing as casual sex. If she offered, would he see her differently? Would it change anything? Or would it just be a moment? Her cheeks turned pink at the thought, and she tried to push it away, but her silence caught Ashbourne's attention. He leaned slightly toward her. Something wrong? You're awfully quiet. Jinx bit her lip, hesitating for a long moment. Then, with a deep breath, she turned to face him. You told me I was pretty and cute when we first met. Ashbourne blinked. Yeah, I remember. Then, she said, her voice steadying, let's have a one-night stand. The controller slipped slightly in his hand. You're serious? She nodded, though her blush deepened. It'll be casual. Just one night. Ashbourne studied her expression carefully. He didn't sense a game, just nervous honesty. This wasn't like her. He recalled what he knew about her, and this felt out of place considering her personality. Maybe this side had always been there. Do you understand what one night means? He asked, gently but firmly. Jinx nodded again. I do, I'm not asking for more. A long beat passed. Then Ashbourne gave a light, amused smile. Well, if you're offering, it would be impolite of me to refuse. After a few moments they separate, Jinx panting heavily while Ashbourne was smiling as he looked at her. That was incredible, Jinx says softly as she looks up at him with a small smile. He returns it, running his fingers through her hair. Affectionately, it was indeed, but we are not done yet. Ashbourne leans and kisses her as a new session starts. The sun had just begun to peek over the city skyline when Ashbourne stepped out of the manor. The fresh morning air brushed against his skin as he adjusted his coat and made his way down the path. Behind him, the manor remained silent, except for the soft sound of someone breathing deeply in slumber. Jinx is still asleep, he thought, his lips curling into a faint smirk. If I were a normal human, she'd probably be pregnant after last night. The amusement in the thought lasted only a moment before he pushed it aside. Today was the beginning of something new and far more entertaining. Supergirl's community service had officially begun. He had made all the necessary arrangements, leaving his assistant with detailed instructions. But before heading to Shadow Corp, he took a small detour. A donut shop near the corner of 5th and Holloway, his guilty pleasure. A box of assorted donuts in hand, he finally made it to his office just before things were set in motion. He barely had time to take a sip of his coffee when a knock echoed through the large glass window behind his desk. He turned, already knowing who it was. Floating just outside, arms crossed and face tight with annoyance, was Supergirl. Ashbourne rose calmly and opened the window. Good morning. A fine day for a first job, wouldn't you say? Supergirl floated in with an unamused expression. Whatever, I want to finish this quickly. Her manners didn't faze him in the least. He stepped aside and gestured toward the interior. Glad to see you're looking forward to it, but in the future kindly use the front door like proper people. We wouldn't want anyone thinking you're here to rob the place. He pressed a button on his desk, summoning his assistant, then strolled past her casually. First things first, your outfit, you'll need to change into something more suitable. Just as he finished the sentence, the door opened, and his assistant entered carrying a neatly folded set of work clothes in a plastic garment bag. Ashbourne accepted the package with a nod. Thank you. Then he turned and handed it to Supergirl, who looked confused and slightly offended. I don't need this, she said flatly. Ashbourne tilted his head. You're working in construction. We can't have you walking around in, well, thought-like clothes. Supergirl blinked. What's a thought? The old assistant's eyes widened in horror, a deep, sinking feeling forming in his gut. He truly feared for Ashbourne's safety. Ashbourne blinked too, visibly surprised. That explains your fashion sense. Supergirl glanced down at her current outfit, a short red skirt ending above her knees, and a blue crop top revealing her midriff. What's wrong with what I'm wearing? Ashbourne said nothing. Instead, he calmly walked to his desk, turned the monitor toward her, and began typing a few words. Supergirl leaned in to see what he was showing her and froze. A few seconds passed. Then her fists clenched. The next instant, with a burst of rage, she slapped the monitor with such force that it shattered and flew across the room, crashing into the wall. Ashbourne, still calm, gave a long-suffering sigh. That was uncalled for. The monitor didn't do anything to deserve such treatment. Supergirl didn't respond with words. Instead, she stepped forward, eyes blazing with fury, and launched a punch straight toward Ashbourne's face, only to stop 1 centimeter short. The wind force alone tousled Ashbourne's hair violently, yet he didn't flinch, not even a twitch. Instead, he simply tilted his head, still smiling. Please control your temper. A punch like that could kill a human 100 times over, and I'd prefer if you didn't traumatize my employees. They're rather delicate. Supergirl stared at him, really stared. And then she saw it. Just like Kal-El warned her, his heart wasn't racing, his breath was steady. His eyes didn't even blink. He wasn't scared of her. He didn't care. Ashbourne pointed behind her, toward the pale-faced assistant still frozen in place. See? He's scared of you? That's the effect you have when you let your temper run loose. Supergirl turned her head slightly to glance at the assistant. She said nothing. Change your clothes, Ashbourne continued, stepping over the monitor debris like it was nothing. Then follow Uncle Rex. He'll show you around, and hopefully by the end of the day, he'll stop fearing you. The assistant swallowed hard, his hands trembling slightly as he adjusted his glasses. Please, follow me. Supergirl shot Ashbourne one final glare, eyes full of suppressed heat. He gave her a pleasant smile in return and popped open his box of donuts. She turned and followed the old assistant out. Ashbourne took a bite of a chocolate-glazed ring and leaned back in his chair, a content sigh leaving his lips. What a glorious morning! The morning sun was already climbing higher when the company car rolled out of Shadow Corp headquarters. Inside, Supergirl sat in stiff silence, her arms crossed, dressed now in an orange and blue construction outfit that did not flatter her mood in the slightest. The bright color scheme clashed with her growing irritation. Next to her sat Ashbourne's assistant. She turned to him, barely able to hide her annoyance. Why are we even in a car? I can fly us to the construction site in less than a minute. Rex gave a calm, polite smile, ever the professional under pressure. You can call me Rex, and as for that, Esbron insisted that you don't fly, and instead take the car. I don't actually know why. Supergirl's eyes narrowed dangerously. Does that jerk enjoy annoying me? Rex laughed, weakly, rubbing the back of his neck. I wouldn't put it past him. I have known him since he was a little child. He's not a bad person, just eccentric. You'll get used to him, probably. She didn't respond. She didn't have to. The look on her face said it all. She definitely was not getting used to Ashbourne anytime soon. The rest of the drive was spent in silence, filled only by the soft hum of the engine and Supergirl's restrained sighs of frustration. When they finally pulled into the dusty clearing that marked the edge of the construction zone, Supergirl stepped out of the car and surveyed the scene. It was a sprawling area of activity, vehicles beeping as they reversed, workers shouting instructions, sparks flying from welders, and clouds of dust rising with every movement. Everyone was wearing the same outfit she now had on, giving the sight a sense of unity. But one man immediately stood out. A giant of a worker trudged across the yard with 2 steel beams balanced on his shoulders like they weighed nothing more than pool noodles. Muscles bulged, veins popped, and he moved with the look of someone who loved every minute of his work. Supergirl raised an eyebrow. Okay, that's impressive. Before she could get a closer look, an older man with gray stubble and a hard hat approached them. He smiled warmly, his crow's feet deepening as he extended a hand toward Rex, then turned his attention to her. So this is the newbie superhero I've been hearing about, he said cheerfully. Supergirl's eye twitched. Newbie? We've got a lot of work to do, Missy, the man continued, clearly not sensing or ignoring her rising irritation. You'll get the hang of it quick enough. We've all been looking forward to seeing how much muscle a Kryptonian can actually offer on a real job site. He turned back to Rex, patting him on the shoulder. Send my regards to the boss, will you? Rex nodded. Of course, Mr. Halley. As the old man walked off, barking orders to a group of workers nearby, Supergirl exhaled slowly through her nose. Rex gave her a slightly sheepish look. You okay? I'm fine, she muttered, already not looking forward to how this day was about to unfold. Construction work, manual labor, with a side of humiliation. Ashbourne Black was definitely going to pay for this, eventually. While Supergirl was reluctantly adjusting to her new role as a hard hat-wearing symbol of civic contribution, Ashbourne Black was already a few steps ahead in his day. Leaving the tall structure of Shadow Corp behind, he made his way toward a far more energized destination, the engineering research lab tucked in the industrial outskirts of the city. This particular trip wasn't scheduled on his calendar. It was a direct request from Gizmo himself. And when your top tech genius calls, you answer. As he strolled into the lab, the sharp scent of metal, solder, and synthetic oils greeted him like a familiar friend. The whir of machines and the clatter of tools danced in the background like music to the scientifically inclined. Gizmo, hunched over a glowing terminal, perked up the moment Ashbourne walked in. "You came!" The small genius grinned widely. "And what's that smell?" Ashbourne raised the box of donuts with a slight grin. "Thought you might like a little sugar with your science." Gizmo lit up like a child on Christmas. "You are the best, boss." Ashbourne chuckled lightly, placing the box on a nearby table. "Try not to get glaze on the circuitry." "Too late," Gizmo mumbled. Already halfway into a powdered jelly. Wiping his fingers, Gizmo gestured eagerly. Come on, I've got something to show you." He led Ashbourne to a sealed-off testing area, where two metallic arm guards rested atop a reinforced platform. They gleamed under the overhead lights, sleek and matte black. "I've been working on these babies ever since the Joker incident," Gizmo said proudly, his voice brimming with excitement. "Took your whole not-standing-out philosophy to heart." He picked up the first arm guard and strapped it around Ashbourne's forearm. "This one's a compact rocket launcher. Only 3 shots, but don't get greedy. Each one packs enough punch to turn a grown man into a red mist. Try it." Ashbourne raised his arm, aimed at a reinforced wall, and fired. A pencil-sized rocket shot out with barely a whisper. A second later, boom! The explosion rocked the room, leaving a smoking crater in the metal. Ashbourne whistled. "Impressive." Gizmo puffed out his chest, clearly delighted. "Of course it is. My genius, your resources, it's a match made in technological heaven." Ashbourne nodded with a grin. "That's why I hired you." "Damn right you did." Gizmo grinned, then grabbed the second arm guard. "And this one's your shield. It's got an energy reactive layer that can reflect physical attacks, bullets, blades, even blunt force." He strapped it on Ashbourne's other arm and activated it. A transparent shimmer extended from the device in a curved arc, humming softly. "Still working out the power drain issue," Gizmo admitted. "Can only take a few hits before it needs a recharge, but it's perfect for brief confrontations." Ashbourne tested it against a few automated projectiles. The bullets bounced off harmlessly, leaving nothing but a mild vibration in the guard. He nodded in approval. Not bad at all. Gizmo folded his arms, clearly pleased. "Now you can defend and fight without drawing too much attention." Ashbourne glanced at both guards, flexing his hands slowly. "Thanks, Gizmo. Hopefully, I'll get a chance to test them against people soon." Gizmo blinked, tilting his head. "You mean, hopefully you won't, right?" Ashbourne just smiled. The kind of smile that said everything and nothing at once. Gizmo sighed. He liked Ashbourne. A lot. The guy was weird. Sure. Eccentric. Unpredictable. Occasionally inappropriate. But where everyone else had either dismissed or manipulated Gizmo for his intelligence, Ashbourne had done the unthinkable. He'd believed in him. Back when Gizmo and the others had first crossed paths with him, they tried to kidnap him for money, but Gizmo never imagined it would lead to something like this. A new life. A new purpose. Ashbourne had given him and the rest of their odd little crew a second shot at life. He hadn't asked them to change who they were. He'd simply offered them space, tools, and trust. And Gizmo, for the first time in a long while, felt like his ideas were being nurtured instead of exploited or dismissed. The lab had become more than a workplace. It was a sanctuary. His new colleagues didn't treat him like a ticking time bomb or an amusing sideshow. They respected him, debated him on his plans, celebrated his success, and offered solutions when he hit a wall. It wasn't a hive academy. It wasn't crime. It was home. And all of that, it was because of him. The fearless weirdo with a glint in his eye and a brain that never slept. Gizmo frowned as he looked at Ashbourne, who was giving him a smile. That fearlessness, that was the problem. If Ashbourne had superpowers, then fine. Maybe the reckless attitude made sense. But he didn't, not even a little. No invincibility. No powers. No magic. Just a man. A normal man. One lucky shot from a desperate thug, and all of this, everything, could come crashing down. And yet, even after getting outfitted with advanced weapons and defensive gear, Ashbourne's first instinct had been hopefully, I get to test them on people. Gizmo sighed and rubbed his temples and said loudly, "Of course that's your takeaway." The problem wasn't just danger, it was that Ashbourne seemed to enjoy it. He didn't avoid Joker that day, he played the Joker, grinned at him. It felt like he was flirting with death just to see how close he could get before it pulled him under. "Relax, Gizmo, I will be fine. Thanks again for these, I need to go back. My dear assistant will need me in my office. See you around," Ashbourne said with a smile, then left. Gizmo nodded and watched Ashbourne leave. Gizmo sighed again, then stood up. He wasn't going to let that reckless maniac throw his life away just because he didn't know how to avoid danger and chaos. Maybe he couldn't change Ashbourne's mind, but he'd find a way to outbuild his stupidity. The first step is to improve the shield energy source. Ashbourne walked leisurely down the hallway of the research lab, the weight of the new arm guards a strange yet not unwelcome sensation on his arms. They were light, compact, and well-balanced, credit to Gizmo's craftsmanship, but still, they felt foreign to him. For most of his life, most of his past life, he corrected silently. He fought with steel and instinct. Swords, daggers, spears, and a sense of rhythm that could only be earned through pain and repetition. These modern weapons, however flashy, lacked the intimacy he had come to expect from battle. Still, he had to admit, there was a certain novelty in launching a pencil-sized missile that could level a truck. He chuckled to himself, flexing his wrist and hearing the faint click of the launcher's mechanism as it locked back into standby. "Not bad, Gizmo," he muttered under his breath. "You might be a gremlin, but you're a talented gremlin." The compliment was genuine. Ashbourne appreciated good work, and Gizmo had outdone himself. It wasn't that Ashbourne needed new weapons. His hidden arsenal, both magical and mundane, already made him more than dangerous. But something about these toys excited the part of him that hadn't felt curious in a long time. A part of him that had grown numb after centuries of repetition. His smile faded as his steps slowed, boots clicking against the floor. Trouble. He didn't have to look for it. In this world, this chaos-riddled universe filled with capes and monsters and walking nuclear bombs, trouble was always around the corner. He didn't mind. Eventually there would be something. A villain who stepped too far. A fool who decided to involve Ashbourne. A problem that words couldn't solve. And when that moment came, well, now he had a little funny firepower to play with. Still, his thoughts drifted elsewhere. Supergirl. The corner of his mouth twitched. She was a mess of contradictions, arrogant and righteous, powerful and impulsive. The girl had the strength to lift buildings and the temper to punch through, one just because someone bruised her ego. Ashbourne didn't fear her, but he certainly didn't trust her either. Not yet. And today was her first day doing honest work. Construction, no less. God help the city if she sneezes wrong. Ashbourne could already imagine the headlines. Alien girl destroys half-finished building, claims it was an accident. Supergirl punches cement mixer, 5 injured, mixer missing. Shadow Corp under fire after Supergirl's bad day. He shook his head with a small laugh, stepping into the elevator. The doors slid shut with a hiss. Whatever happened, he knew one thing for certain. It wouldn't be boring. And deep down, he didn't want it to be. The smell of roasted chicken and freshly baked cornbread filled the Kent family kitchen. The wooden table, modest but warm, was surrounded by faces marked with concern and affection. Kara sat in her usual seat, still wearing her civilian clothes, after a long day. Her fork poked at her food, without much enthusiasm. Clark, ever the attentive cousin, looked at her from across the table. "So," he asked casually, "how was your first day?" Kara's hand froze mid-poke, her jaw tightened, and she exhaled sharply through her nose. "Ashbourne is a jerk," she muttered with venom. "An absolute jerk. The worst person to be around." Clark's expression immediately shifted, his normally kind eyes narrowing just a touch. "What did he do?" he asked, voice calm but serious. Jonathan Kent paused his chewing, and Martha Kent looked up from her plate, concern knitting her brows. The room went still. Kara hesitated for a moment, then crossed her arms. "He indirectly called me a thought." Silence fell like a dropped brick. Kara's cheeks flared with red, not from embarrassment, but anger. "I mean, yeah, my outfit shows a little skin, so what? Since when does that make me a thought?" Her fork stabbed her mashed potatoes with unintentional force. I really wanted to punch that guy through a wall. Jonathan blinked slowly. What? Martha coughed lightly and reached for her water. Maybe we should focus on what else happened today, aside from your charming boss, she said with a diplomatic smile. Kara's glare softened a little, and she looked down at her food again. It was strange, she said quietly, being around people like that. Normal people, working like one of them instead of flying over everything. It was weird at first, but her voice dropped as she poked at her food again. It was unexpectedly a little fun. Clark smiled, the tension in his shoulders easing. That's good to hear, he said gently. Martha nodded. Sometimes the hardest part is finding connection in the everyday. But when you do, it's worth it. Kara gave a small shrug, but the corner of her mouth curved up, just barely. The family shared a few light chuckles after that. The mood lifting like fog in the morning sun. Even with her complaints, it was clear to all of them. Kara had taken the first step into something new. Something human. Elsewhere across the city, Ashbourne sat at his desk, eyes scanning the report on his tablet with an almost bored expression. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling through his nose with mild disappointment. No incidents, he muttered to himself. No structural damage, no traumatized coworkers, not even a cracked sidewalk. He closed the file and tossed the tablet onto the desk, rubbing his temple. Sure, he was glad his employees were unharmed, that much he could admit. But still, after all the trouble he'd gone through, the carefully crafted setup, the passive-aggressive outfit swap, nothing. How utterly anticlimactic, he mumbled with a disappointed look. He glanced at the wall clock. Well, there's always tomorrow. Time had a strange way of slipping by when things were calm. It had been a month since Kara's first day at Shadow Corp's construction division. The fire of her initial anger had cooled into something much more productive. Ashbourne hadn't crossed paths with her since that chaotic first day, and to most, it would have seemed like he'd forgotten about her entirely. But in truth, he simply let things play out. Kara, under the supervision of her direct boss, Mr. Halley, settled into her role seamlessly. She no longer stuck out like an alien among humans. Instead, she moved with her team, listened, joked, and even laughed during breaks. The work was grueling, repetitive, and physical, just what she needed. Most surprising of all was her growing rivalry with Mammoth. The towering, soft-spoken hulk of a man rarely showed much interest in anything outside of lifting things and doing his job. But Kara's unexpected drive, her need to outpace, outlift, and outperform lit a spark in him. At first, he silently matched her efforts. Then she responded by pushing harder. The two now had an unspoken competition. Who could move the most steel, patch the most concrete, finish their section first? Their co-workers watched the daily contest with a mix of amusement and awe. Halley, for his part, kept his thoughts to himself, though he may have quietly adjusted project timelines to accommodate the growing productivity. Meanwhile, Ashbourne kept to his routines. The halls of Shadow Corp saw him often, but never for long. Every few days he disappeared, sometimes out of state, sometimes just to another corner of the city, always with some random reason, visiting some entertainment place, checking on the progress of some division, or visiting some restaurant. And sometimes his road took him back to Jinx. Their nights were vivid, fleeting, and wrapped in silent understanding. He felt no need to string her along with promises or warmth, and she didn't seem to want them. What they had was simple, transactional in nature, yet not without its mutual enjoyment. Jinx was passionate, wild, and delightfully unpredictable. Their sessions weren't born from love, just simple fun. Ashbourne sometimes mused on how this all started. Making her his maid had been little more than a passing thought, a convenient solution at the time. Now it had morphed into something far more entertaining than he had expected. Peace, as always, was fleeting. For Kara, that truth slammed back into her life in the form of a sudden summons from the one person she had gone a whole month successfully avoiding, Ashbourne. The message had been brief, annoyingly polite, and entirely unwelcome. She was to report to his office immediately. She almost ignored it on principle, but the fact was, she was still bound by the agreement. Community service or not, she had to at least pretend to follow protocol. With a sigh that could have been steel, Kara threw on her work jacket and took the elevator up to the boss's floor. When she stepped into the sleek office, Ashbourne was hunched over his desk, fingers flying over a keyboard, screens flickering around him. He didn't even look up until she was halfway to the desk. Then he stopped, smiled as if nothing had changed. Well, if it isn't our newest star employee, he said with that infuriatingly calm tone. How have things been? Cora folded her arms, a scowl already forming. Things were good, until I had to see your face again. Ashbourne didn't flinch. If anything, his smile widened. Glad to hear that. And for what it's worth, I like your current outfit more. Much more fitting for the kind of work you've been doing. She gritted her teeth. Ever since their last interaction, she had ditched her superhero costume while working. Blue jeans, orange and blue vest, construction gloves. It made her blend in more. Made her feel like part of the team. But hearing him say it made her skin crawl. Don't push your luck, she said, her tone sharp. But he didn't take the bait. Instead, he spun one of his monitors around to face her. Relax. I didn't bring you here to comment on your fashion. I received your performance review from Mr. Halley, and I wanted to go over your compensation. Kara blinked. Compensation? Her brows knitted together. This is community service. It's not that simple, Ashbourne replied, tapping the screen. You were expected to match the output of a regular human for a year. But according to this, he gestured to the graphs and spreadsheets. You've done more than 10 times of that. Your involvement saved a considerable portion of our housing charity fund. And since that fund was earmarked for paying workers, well, you've earned it. Cora leaned forward despite herself, eyes scanning the breakdown. There were dates, task records, efficiency charts, even a small footnote. Deduction. One office monitor destroyed. Replacement cost $82 that made her frown. It was real. Concrete. A full analysis of everything she'd done. She looked up at Ashbourne, who held out a sealed envelope. You earned it. Kuro took the envelope slowly, like it might explode. She stared at it for a long moment, then narrowed her eyes. I don't need your money. Ashbourne's reply came without hesitation. It's not mine. It's yours. You earned it. I may be a jerk in your eyes, he smiled, but I'm a fair employer. What you do with the paycheck is your call. Burn it. Donate it. Frame it. Doesn't matter to me. Carr stood still for a second, her face unreadable. Then he turned back to his screen. Ponder it on your own time. I've got work to do. With her lips pressed into a thin line, Kara spun on her heel and left the room in silence. Once outside, she looked down at the envelope in her hand. The name Supergirl was printed on it. Inside was a number that made her breath hitch, the kind of paycheck her cousin Clark would earn after 6 months of full-time journalism. It felt wrong, but it also felt right. The spreadsheet, the data, it wasn't flattery. It was math. She had worked for this, and that was the first time in her life where doing something as a normal person without a cape had brought her this kind of internal conflict. The envelope weighed more than paper should. The Kent farmhouse was quiet that evening, bathed in the soft golden hue of the setting sun. Kara stood in the living room, the envelope in her hands now opened, her paycheck resting neatly on the coffee table. Clark, Martha, and Jonathan sat around her, each with a look of mild confusion and curiosity as they listened to her recount the odd events of her visit to Ashbourne's office. I still don't get it, Kara said, her arms crossed and her expression conflicted. He went out of his way to show me everything. Gave me this like I earned it. He sounded genuine. Clark frowned, rubbing his chin. That's unexpected. I wonder what he's thinking. I honestly can't tell what goes through his head, Kara said with a shake of her head. Even his employees say he's strange, random even, but they all respect him. They talk about him like he's, I don't know, some kind of misunderstood hero or something. They defend him in a heartbeat. Clark leaned back, thoughtful. I've seen a few articles pop up from time to time. Best working environment, progressive employer, Ashbourne Black sets a new standard, things like that. A lot of praise coming his way for being fair and just. Martha, always the curious soul, tilted her head. Do you know why they speak so highly of him? Kara nodded slowly and sat down, placing her hands on her knees. Yeah, I've heard a few stories since I started working there. She took a breath before recounting them. There was one guy who used to be a small-time villain. He told me he and his friends once tried to kidnap Ashbourne, but they failed miserably. The thing is, Ashbourne didn't press charges. Instead, he offered them jobs. Good paying ones, jobs that matched their skills. And when they visited his house one day, totally uninvited, they got too rough and almost hurt him. You know what he did? He laughed it off and let them sleep there. Now that guy calls him Fearless Boss like he's some kind of legend. Clark raised an eyebrow. That doesn't sound like any CEO I know. There's more, Kara continued. My direct boss, Mr. Halley. He had a back condition. Really serious. Surgery was expensive, and he'd have to work for years just to afford part of it, or wait for years before he could have a chance to do it. Ashbourne paid for the operation and gave him a full year off. Fully paid. Oh my, Martha murmured, hand over her mouth. And others say he pays higher than any other construction company. Better safety, better benefits. Some of them even said he's the only person who treats them fairly. For a moment the room was silent as the weight of the story settled in. Martha looked thoughtful. Well, he certainly sounds like a nice man. Kara looked away, her voice quieter. Yeah, he seems good to most people who know him. Everyone says he's just eccentric, a bit of an oddball, but outside of that, he is nice and kind. She rubbed the back of her neck. But I don't know how to deal with him. I don't like him. All I see is an annoying, smug jerk who seems to enjoy pushing my buttons. And yet, everyone else sees a great person. Am I missing something? Clark sighed. You're not alone. I can't tell what his deal is either. There's something off-putting about him, but I can't put my finger on it. He doesn't feel dangerous, but he doesn't feel normal either. Jonathan finally spoke, setting his coffee down. Maybe it's because he's fearless. You're not used to people like that, Clark. People are usually scared of you, of your strength. They show fear or respect. But that young man, he doesn't flinch, doesn't act impressed or intimidated. That's different. He gave a small smile. It can be a little disturbing. Sure. But if he's not doing anything wrong, maybe give him the benefit of the doubt. Kara sat back, frowning as she looked down at the check again. Clark wondered if he was just a weird guy with a good heart. Or maybe he was playing a long game no one could see yet. Either way, they haven't done figuring him out yet. The night in Jump City had a certain charm to it. Cool air, neon lights reflecting off wet pavement, and the buzz of late-night chatter spilling from restaurants and shops. Ashbourne walked at a leisurely pace, the smell of fresh pizza still clinging faintly to his clothes from the small corner shop he had just dined in. It had been a simple, peaceful dinner, thin crust, double pepperoni, and no one trying to blow him up or lecture him about morality. A rare luxury. He tucked his hands into his pockets and turned a corner, heading a few blocks down. Jinx had offhandedly mentioned a place nearby, apparently the best spot in Jump City for milkshakes. Thick, creamy, made with real ice cream, not the processed powder junk. He figured, why not? His quiet stroll was interrupted when two bodies suddenly came crashing down from above, landing in a clumsy heap of limbs and dust in a trash pile to his left. Ashbourne halted, blinking. His eyes flicked down to the pair as they stirred. Huh? From the heap emerged Raven and Starfire, looking disheveled and mildly annoyed, though at each other rather than the pile they'd just been thrown into. They began bickering almost immediately, not even realizing they had an audience. I told you to hover, not dive like a meteor, Raven snapped, brushing a banana peel off her shoulder. You were the one who said you could manage the lift. On my planet, even babies discover the joy of flight within their first week, Starfire retorted with a frustrated pout. Ashbourne tilted his head, intrigued. Maybe the two of you should consider telling each other more about your lives. Might help you learn how to control each other's powers. The girls froze mid-argument and whirled around. Starfire's eyes narrowed, defensive and sharp. What are you doing here? She asked coldly. Were you eavesdropping? Ashbourne gave his trademark shrug and a smile that was impossible to read. Hard not to overhear when two flying people crash into trash 2 feet away from me and start tearing into each other like rival soap opera stars. I was just walking by. Raven narrowed her eyes, then tilted her head slightly. Curious. Wait, you know we traded bodies? He gestured casually. I heard you talking, and I'm not exactly an idiot. Filling in some context is not hard. There was a brief silence. Ashbourne gave a small nod toward them. If you're having trouble with your powers, just talk. Really talk. How you experience things, what your instincts tell you. It'll help more than you think. The girls didn't respond, still processing both his presence and his oddly practical advice. Ashbourne, seeming completely unbothered, gave a light wave. Anyway, I've got a date with a milkshake. Good luck with whatever this chaos is. He turned and continued his walk, his coat swaying gently with each step. Back in the alley, Raven and Starfire stood in silence for a moment. Then, slowly, they looked at each other. the first real pause they'd had since the body swap began. No more yelling, no accusations. Just a long look, then a quiet, shared nod. Without a word, the two moved deeper into the alley and sat down, cross-legged across from each other. No flying, no spells, just stories. Meanwhile, Ashbourne stepped into the softly lit coffee shop, the warm aroma of roasted beans and sweet vanilla welcoming him. The bell above the door chimed softly. The coffee shop was quiet, the kind of place where music hummed low and patrons kept to their little corners of peace. Ashbourne sat near the window, sipping slowly on a tall glass of chocolate milkshake, rich, creamy, and topped with a generous swirl of whipped cream. Jinx was right. It was heavenly. He was mid-sip when the bell over the door rang again, the soft chime cutting through the atmosphere like a warning bell. 3 figures walked in, one by one, with unmistakable presence. Robin, stern and calculating. Cyborg, towering and half-mechanical. Beast Boy, who at the moment had taken the form of a large green-furred dog. Their eyes glowed with a distinct blue light, unnatural, sharp, and scanning. Ashbourne paused. He set the milkshake down slowly. The straw bobbed slightly. Beast Boy, still in dog form, padded forward and sniffed at Ashbourne's coat, snout twitching. A deep inhale. Then another. Ashbourne stared back, unmoving, calm as ever. Robin crossed his arms. Cyborg loomed behind them. Ashbourne finally spoke, dryly. If this is about the milkshake, I'm not sharing. Silence. Then, without warning, Cyborg stepped forward. Arms out. Ashbourne blinked once before he was wrapped in a full-blown bear hug, the kind that creaked bones and crushed personal space into oblivion. Ashbourne's arms remained limp at his sides as Cyborg lifted him like a rag doll. The towering man turned, still grinning, and began to walk out of the shop with Ashbourne in his arms like he weighed Wayne. Robin followed without a word. Beast Boy shifted back into his human form mid-step and joined them. Ashbourne, still not struggling, glanced back at his half-finished milkshake and sighed. At least let me finish the drink. No one answered. He rested his chin against Cyborg's shoulder, staring off at the dark streets of Jump City as they carried him away. He looked more inconvenienced than alarmed. I didn't touch the girls, he muttered. Did the scent still linger despite that? Or is this about something else? I didn't say anything offensive in this city, did I? Still no answers. Only glowing blue eyes and determined silence. Ashbourne closed his own eyes for a moment. He wasn't afraid, more like mildly intrigued. In the end, he chuckled lightly while saying, well, third time's a charm. In the shadows of the abandoned theater, dust hung thick on the surfaces. Old curtains sagged, and the scent of soot clung to the crumbling walls. From a broken window above, Starfire, clad in Raven's body, landed gracefully beside Raven, still wearing Starfire's form. Both were silent, their expressions sharper than ever. They had spent the past hours sharing stories, memories, fears, and dreams, things neither had spoken of in all their time as teammates. But now, with their bond deepened, they had begun unlocking one another's powers, clumsily at first, but with increasing success. It was far from perfect, but it was progress. A progress sparked by a single casual comment. As Starfire adjusted her cloak, she murmured, we should thank Ashbourne when we see him again. Raven nodded, sighing. His advice was surprisingly helpful. They moved in tandem now, like twin shadows, creeping deeper into the broken heart of the theater. Below, blue flames danced violently inside a runic circle. The Puppet King waved a glowing control wand with increasing frustration. Beside the fire, a puppet sat lifeless, a pale replica of Ashbourne without the ever-present smile he has. But it didn't move. A voice casual and calm drifted through the stale air. Are you sure you are following steps? Ashbourne said, arms loosely bound by Cyborg's metallic restraints, sitting cross-legged like he was on a picnic. He stared at the Puppet King with a curious gleam in his eye. Maybe refer to the source book of your magic for guidance. The Puppet King snarled. You're a prisoner. Ashbourne nodded, smile undimmed. And I'm being polite about it, and trying to help you. No need to be rude. From their perch above, the girls exchanged a look. Raven raised an eyebrow. Starfire's lips twitched, almost amused. Ashbourne continued, tilting his head. Maybe it's broken. Try another one. The Puppet King replied in a frustrated tone. No, it is completely fine. I am sure of that. So if it's not broken, Could it be magic limits? Maybe the power's depleted? Ashbourne helpfully asked. No, the Puppet King snapped. This spell should control hundreds, thousands of minds. Ashbourne hummed, intrigued. Fascinating. Was that the same spell that caused the Titan girls to switch bodies, by any chance? If so, maybe the magic is not working, because of that. That's not how it works, the Puppet King replied angrily. Has it happened before? Ashbourne asked with a grin. Any recorded cases? The Puppet King paused. Ashbourne's smile widened knowingly. So, no. Sounds like a gap in your knowledge. Rage burned brighter in the king's eyes than the fire itself. Once I have your body, I'll shatter your puppet piece by piece. Enthusiasm is good, Ashbourne replied lightly. Have you ever tried anything other than puppeteering, poetry, ballroom dancing? The Puppet King's growl was almost inhuman. If you don't shut up, I'll let my puppets tear you limb from limb. I don't care about your money or your status. Ashbourne shrugged, calm as ever. The Puppet King turned back to the blue flames, yanking out a vial of glowing liquid and pouring it into the fire. The flames flared higher, hotter, casting an eerie hue across the room. He reached toward the bound teen Titan puppets near the stage and declared, I will take your bodies permanently. And once I do, this city and that insufferable idiot, he jabbed a finger at Ashbourne, will belong to me. Ashbourne shook his head, clearly amused by the whole situation. The flames roared, casting shadows that danced like specters against the cracked and weathered walls of the abandoned theater. Blue light bathed the stage in a haunting glow as the Puppet King, face twisted with manic glee, gave his next command. I don't want any interruption. Search and destroy, he barked. The puppets bearing the forms of Robin, Cyborg, and Beast Boy didn't reply. Instead, with empty, glowing eyes, they began to move, metal footsteps and quiet padding echoing as they scouted the dark corners of the theater. Near the heart of the flame, the Puppet King brought forth a small bundle of stitched wooden puppets, the puppet replicas of the Teen Titans. The puppets twitched weakly, their tiny voices whispering, "No, stop, help." But their cries were drowned out by crackling flame and their creator's cruelty. The Puppet King released them. They fell toward the fire. But they never touched it. A black orb, swirling with pulsing shadow, expanded from the darkness and caught the puppets mid-air, wrapping them in protective energy. The orb pulsed once, then rose like a sentient sphere toward the catwalk, where Raven and Starfire were crouched, half hidden by rusted beams and torn curtains. "Get them!" the Puppet King screamed, fury seizing him. "Rip them apart!" Ashbourne, still bound, turned his gaze upward. He watched with mild amusement as Raven and Starfire fumbled to defend themselves, ducking and dodging under the assault of their teammates' controlled bodies. They were improving with their powers. Yes, but it was still clumsy, uncoordinated, like two dancers learning a new rhythm on stage. Ashbourne's smile curled, faint and entertained. This magic, this entire scenario was nothing to him. The truth was simple. The spell controlling the puppets had no power over Ashbourne. The poor Puppet King, obsessed with control, didn't know, couldn't know. The threads of this show were tangled, but Ashbourne already knew the script from start to end. He stood up slowly, unhurried, silent, his gaze never leaving the Puppet King, who was too busy howling at his puppets to notice. Ashbourne approached. No resistance, no fear, just quiet steps over old floorboards. The Puppet King turned, sensing something behind him. Too late! Ashbourne's tied hands reached forward, and he calmly plucked the control device from the villain's grip like it was a toy dropped by a child. The Puppet King's eyes widened in disbelief. Ashbourne smiled down at him. "You're boring." With a flick of his wrist, he tossed the device into the blue fire. The Puppet King screamed, "No!" and lunged, but Ashbourne's foot came down with brutal finality, pinning him to the floor. The fire flared, then pulsed, and the king shrieked as blue light burst from his eyes, his body convulsing beneath Ashbourne's boot. "Without magic," the king gasped. He didn't finish. The body went limp, slumping like a marionette with its strings cut. Ashbourne, with a smile, looked toward the Titans, now freed from the spell. Their glowing eyes had faded, replaced with wide, stunned expressions. The girls now regained their bodies. They were themselves again, and they were all staring at him. Still smiling, still calmly pressing his foot into the lifeless puppet, Ashbourne lifted his tied hands. "Care to free me?" he asked lightly. "It's kind of annoying to stay like this." But none of the Titans moved. They just stood there, staring. The Titan Tower loomed tall against the early morning sky, the first hints of dawn brushing its surface with pale gold light. Inside, the team returned, exhausted but silent, their steps echoing through the halls as they trudged toward the common room. The battle was over. The Puppet King was gone. Their bodies were their own again, but their minds lingered on Ashbourne. Robin broke the silence first, rubbing the back of his neck and frowning. "I don't like him," he said flatly. Starfire, floating beside him in a gentle glide, turned her head. "He helped us. He saved us." Robin shook his head. "I know, but something about him rubs me the wrong way." Beast Boy flopped onto the couch, shifting back into human form with a sigh. "Dude's got nerves of steel, though. I legit thought the Puppet King was gonna go nuclear on him, and the dude just sat there, calm and smiling. He was even brainstorming magical theory with the guy holding him prisoner." Cyborg, leaning against the wall, looked at Raven. "Speaking of which, why didn't the magic work on him? Any clue?" Raven folded her arms. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "I don't know how the Puppet King's magic actually works. But it could be what Ashbourne suggested. The magic was weakened by the body swap incident. Maybe it was stretched too thin, or disrupted somehow. It's not impossible." Robin narrowed his eyes. "Convenient?" Beast Boy chuckled. "Maybe you just don't like him because he shot your mentor in the—" Robin froze. Starfire gasped. "Oh my." Cyborg burst out laughing, and even Raven's stoic facade cracked with a faint smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "Too soon?" Beast Boy grinned. Robin slowly turned his head, glaring. "Yes." As the laughter died down, Raven drifted away toward the windows, her gaze settling on the horizon, where the first real sunlight began to spill across the sea. Inside, her thoughts stirred. The magic didn't work on Ashbourne, and not just because of the body swap, maybe. There was something else. A darkness. Not evil, not chaotic, but calm, deep, unfathomable. Something she felt only the moment he stepped near her, but she had no proof. No evidence, just a feeling, a shadow whispering at the edge of her perception. She couldn't accuse him, not after he'd helped them, not after he'd risked himself, however casually, to stop the Puppet King. Still, there's something inside him, something she doesn't understand.